Councillor Williamson, thank you for the mason jars. Appreciate that. See if you can, I'll see if I can send a couple back with some tomatoes in it for you in August.
We are live now.
Okay, the bells are tolling downtown St. Catharines. So good afternoon and welcome to the regular meeting of Council and General Committee for Monday, May 31st, 2021. So we'll start with the playing of O Canada.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Carton bras et porter le pays, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. We would traditionally start with a land acknowledgement, but we're going to do a different kind of acknowledgement today. Over the weekend, our country learned about 215 children who died at a residential school in Kamloops, BC. On behalf of the City of St. Catharines, I share our condolences and our respect to those children and their families. The flags at all city facilities have been lowered to half-mast until at least June 8th, as we join the country to mourn and remember and reconcile with this truth. It's 1 hour for each child that the flags will fly at half-mast. There's also a monument of children's shoes on the front steps of City Hall and at memorial locations across the country. This is a moment to reflect on the truth that Indigenous families have been living for generations. It is not news to those many families who lost their children and loved ones at residential schools. The discovery of the mass grave is a confirmation of what these families knew about through the stories of survivors and reported through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As Canadians, we must never forget that residential schools that were operated by the government forcefully removed Indigenous children from their families and communities, robbed them of their culture, and exposed many of them to physical, mental, and sexual abuse. And the story from Kamloops is a reality check for all of us, that this is not just history, this is the reality that many families are dealing with through generations of trauma. This is a moment for all of us to reconcile with that truth, mourn, and take action to prevent it from ever happening again. After we grieve and mourn with the families, we must turn to what can we do from here. This is what living truth and reconciliation is about. It is a moment to reconcile with the truth of our country and the heartbreaking truth that generations of Indigenous families have endured. It is a moment for reconciliation with the reality, and considering what actions we must take to reconcile with Indigenous communities. It's been a tough weekend. So I would like to ask council, staff, and everyone watching to pause for 2 minutes and 15 seconds of reflection. Thank you. And I want our Indigenous community to know that we're thinking about them here in Niagara as well. If you have an opportunity to come by City Hall and take a look at spend some time with the shoes, the little children's shoes that are on the steps of City Hall. Take an opportunity to bring your kids with you, explain to them why those shoes are there. And if you get an opportunity, reach out to the Niagara Native Center. They also have a support line for those who may be from our Indigenous community who are struggling through this, as well as the Fort Erie Friendship Center. So there's resources that are available to learn more about this. So as we journey on through this grief, there's also an opportunity for learning. June is National Indigenous Month, and it's to honor the history, heritage, and diversity of Indigenous peoples in Canada. It is also an opportunity to recognize the strength of present-day Indigenous communities. National Indigenous Peoples Day is June 21st. So throughout the month of June, again, this is an opportunity for all of us to learn more about the history of Indigenous in our community, in our country, and to really get to the truth. And so spend some time, if you can. Our local library has a lot of resources. Go online as well and take the opportunity to do that. It also is Seniors Month for June, which is over the last year, we have seen the resilience and strength of our seniors in so many ways. And this is time to celebrate the older adults in our lives. Please take a moment to do that. And I also like to take an opportunity to give a shout out to the city staff at the senior centers here in our community for their Senior Center Without Walls. I look forward to being a guest on Senior Centers Without Walls tomorrow as we gather with our older adults in our community. And our staff have done an amazing job over the past year being innovative in its programming to ensure that the connectivity between older adults in our community have been maintained. June is also Pride Month. Pride Niagara has a great virtual lineup of events to continue to recognize and celebrate Pride Week here in Niagara. The flag will be flying at City Hall, and we'll also be doing the official opening to the crosswalk next Tuesday. And this year, we are very proud to show our pride in new ways, including this crosswalk at St. Paul Street, just in time at St. Paul and Garden Center. And it's just downtown between Mate and the First Ontario Performing Arts Center, just in time for Pride Month. I want to thank our staff for the opportunity to pull all that together as we headed in from spring until summer. I want to thank our LGBTQ2+ advisory committee for all your work, and to the city staff as we celebrate the symbol of inclusion, representation, and diversity that makes up our amazing community. This week is Accessibility Week. It's an opportunity to celebrate the valuable contributions of Canadians with disabilities, recognizing the efforts of individuals, communities, and workplaces that are actively working to remove barriers to accessibility and inclusion. We all benefit from a society and an economy without barriers to inclusion. When persons with disabilities can participate in all aspects of society, including accessing employment, resources, and services, it enriches our economy. Together, let's continue to take action to build an inclusive and accessible city for everyone. I just want to say thank you to our Accessibility Advisory Committee for the work that they've done to develop the accessibility plan, which we're following here in the city of St. Catharines. We have some of the most accessible new buildings built in Ontario here in St. Catharines, with the First Ontario Performing Arts Center and the Meridian Center. And so we're leading by example, and we want to continue to build an accessible community for all. ALS is in June as well, and it's important to spread the message. Over 1,000 Canadians who are diagnosed with ALS each year face progressive paralysis as a result of the brain no longer being able to communicate with muscles of the body. There's a virtual walk to end ALS on June 20th. I'll be participating in that walk, and to visit the website, check out ALS Niagara to help support someone in our community. And June is also a Heritage Month for Italian heritage, and it's to celebrate all things Italian Canadian. In 2010, the Ontario legislature passed a bill to officially declare June Italian Heritage Month, and it recognizes the important contributions immigrants have made in building Ontario's communities and the economic, political, social, and cultural achievements of Italian Canadians. And this year, we just celebrated the 60th anniversary of Club Roma here in our community, built by Italians in our community who were moving here, who had come here to help to get away from what was happening in their home country, but to start fresh here in St. Catharines. And they have really enriched us in so many ways. So it's an important way to celebrate our Italian heritage here in St. Catharines. And the final message before we head into this council meeting, the final meeting of May 31st. It's also the final meeting for someone who's very close to all of us. Many of our council members have been a part of the team, and Shelley Chemnitz. Tonight is a bittersweet council meeting as we bid farewell to our CAO, our leader, Shelley Chemnitz. This is her last official council meeting, so councilors, let's make it an interesting one for her. Although she'll be retiring later in the summer, this is her final step into the big show of council. We wish her all the best in retirement. She will certainly be missed. And Shelley was born in St. Catharines, and I'm just going to briefly touch on born and raised in St. Catharines, Brock University graduate, although she wasn't a student of Joe Kushner, and we'll just leave that one to hang there for a few seconds. And she earned a Bachelor of Business Administration and her Chartered Accounting degrees in 1989. So she's been here her whole life, including Brock University. She was hired in 1991 as the Accounting and Payroll Supervisor. So she started in July of 1991, and for 31 years has built an outstanding career here at the City of St. Catharines. In 2008, she became the Director of Finance, where she fine-tuned the budgeting skills of this organization. And by the spring of 2015, she was promoted to Commissioner of Corporate Services. And after an extensive recruiting process in 2018, City Council announced that Shelley was the successful candidate for the CAO position, the most senior position at the city, providing leadership and direction across the entire corporation of more than 900 employees, working closely with City Council to implement our strategic plan. Shelley's appointment as CAO was a very proud moment and a historic moment for the City of St. Catharines, as it marked the first time a female had risen to the top job of CAO here at the City of St. Catharines, something that we were all very proud to put up and talk about and say, this is who we are as a community. Throughout her career, Shelley has earned the respect and friendship of her coworkers, along with many mayors and councillors she has worked with. And she has been a role model to other women in the corporation, acting in a mentorship role as well. She is intelligent, she's collaborative, she is empathetic, she is respectful, she is engaged, and she has been a steady and committed leader here at the City of St. Catharines. The one thing I truly appreciate about Shelley is her love for our community. She chose to pursue her post-secondary education here in St. Catharines. She grew her career here in St. Catharines, and she grew her family here in St. Catharines. She knows this community like just to the best of anybody's ability, and she invested in it. And I got to tell you, over the course of the last 15 months, while we navigated the challenges of this pandemic, I couldn't have asked for a better leader of our community. She has been that voice of calm and reassuring leadership. And I can tell you from day one, when the pandemic was declared, Shelley was that person who had a steady hand as we navigated through the last 16, 17 months. She has been at the table from day one with the emergency management team, communicating with staff and council, providing governance. And I got to tell you, from my vantage point, she was available 24/7 because we know none of us had a roadmap, but communications between Shelley and myself were greatly appreciated. And there's many times where those phone calls were me maybe getting a little ahead of myself, where Shelley was the one to say, okay, nope, we got to do this. Here's the steps we've got to take. And I got to tell you, that was very helpful for me personally as well. So I just want to say, if everyone can unmute their mics, we're going to take an opportunity to give a rousing applause to Shelley Kemnitz, 31 years at the City of St. Catharines. Let's go. So over the course of the meeting, council, when you have an opportunity, if you want to say something, feel free. We've got a lot on the agenda, but when you get an opportunity and you're talking about something, feel free to share a story with Shelley. This is Shelley's meeting today. So, well, we've got a lot on the agenda. Let's make it all about Shelley as well. All right.
Well, can Shelley say something?
I was going to leave that until the end, but if you want to do something, go ahead. It's your meeting. Yeah, I'm going to go on mute now.
What if Shelley wants to slip away? Can she say?
We locked the doors. We've locked the doors. You're in for the evening.
All right. Well, I really did want to say tonight, thank you very much. It's an overwhelming feeling of thank you for the kind words and the very many well wishes that are coming from all of you. I'm so grateful for the opportunities I've had here serving at the city. I came here 30 years ago and I was so unsure of my decision to accept this job. I kept thinking, working at City Hall possibly may be one of the more boring jobs I could have chosen. And it ended up being anything but boring and so much more than a job. And I'm so thankful for that. I have a few thank yous that I'd like to extend tonight. To Mayor and Council, thank you very much for your support over the years, especially this last year. In the early days of COVID, we needed to make so many significant decisions with very little information and information that was changing quickly. And as Mayor and Council, you placed a high degree of trust in me and our team to make the decisions. I recognize for Council that's not easy. And if you want to jump in and fix everything for your constituents, but you recognized staff were on it and gave us your support. Thank you. If you think it's difficult for Council, it's even more difficult for a mayor, any mayor, being in the thick of things. And so Mayor Sendzik, thank you for trusting and supporting me through all the decisions over the years. I know you wanted to jump in and fix it all right away. I could feel it through the phone. You and we did consult regularly, as you said, and we were and continue to be on the same page about things. So I'm very grateful for that. You consistently advocated to the residents and businesses that reached out to you. And that information is always essential in our decision making. I always want to take a little bit of time and thank my family. Over the years, the city calendar has often been the governing choice in planning our family calendar. It worked well, and the support of my family made everything easier. Their calendar will be the only one I have now, so Brian, Josh, and Emily had best be prepared for me to start running that one. I'd also like to say publicly how appreciative I am for the great team we have here at the city. They're dedicated, they're responsible, they're experts at delivering services to our community, and I really enjoyed being part of their team. As a CAO, your role is to provide leadership. When you have an excellent team, your job is so much easier. And at the city, we have that team. We have an excellent leadership team throughout the corporation, and most especially at the senior leadership table. They support each other and their staff. And through stressful times, this team keeps moving, especially the last year when our work life could be so frustrating, stressful, and ultimately exhausting. But daily, as I signed into Zoom meetings, it was evident our team was actively combating those challenges with humor, respect, and care for each other. And while it didn't entirely wash away the heavy stuff, it certainly made it easier to weather. I'm thankful for that and very confident that Dave will continue to foster that very important aspect of life here at the city. And while I have the floor, there's one last priority I'd like to highlight. Through my career, and especially these last years at CAO, I've had a strong focus on working to improve the health of our teams. We need everyone to feel welcomed. We need everyone to feel valued. And while we work together each day to achieve common goals and objectives, it's vital we also work to create and maintain a space where everyone is comfortable, everyone feels confident and courageous to give their opinions, even if those opinions differ from every other opinion they've heard expressed. Diverse backgrounds, experience, and opinions strengthen and enrich our teams, and it's by seeking out, fostering, and supporting that diversity that we will strengthen and improve our service to the community. Without that diversity, we surely miss opportunities in taking our service to a level that it needs to go. I know senior leadership is committed to this. Dave Oakes, our new CAO, is committed to this. Council and mayor are committed to it. I'm very thankful for the opportunity to lead this particular type of work here at the city, and I know it will continue. I'm going to miss working with everyone, but I'm very excited to see where you all take the city from here. So thank you very
much. So thank you very much, Shelley. Those are beautiful words. And I just want you to know that on behalf of council has pooled together some resources, and we've created a scholarship at Brock University for female students from St. Catharines in financial management and leadership at the Goodman School of Business. So as a testament to you, there will be a female student who will be the recipient from St. Catharines for that.
Well, thank you. That is very overwhelming. Thank you so much. That's so fitting. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, as they say, now let's go on with the show. Let's make it an interesting one. And I'll turn it over to the deputy clerk, Ms. Sullivan, who will talk us through the additional agenda items that were placed in the sugar sink, I believe, and any other changes that may be made to council to the agenda tonight.
So items of additional correspondence are a confidential memo from Corporate Support Services regarding an arbitration update, a PDF document with a petition E3351 to the House of Commons Parliament of Canada regarding motion item 11.1, in-camera minutes from the Surplus Lands Task Force meeting of April 1st, 2021, a resolution from York Region regarding provincial roadmap to reopening, a memo from Financial Management Services regarding insurance requirements for patios. And the following are two amendments to the agenda. It's just related to the order. One is that the in-camera session and motions arising from in-camera will be after the calls for notices of motion. And finally, that the bylaws will be considered following the agency boards and committee reports.
Any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing no changes to the agenda, can I have a motion to move and second? Councillor Miller, Councillor Phillips, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Any conflicts of interest tonight? Okay, seeing no conflicts of interest, adoption of the minutes. We have a motion that council adopt the minutes of the meeting held on Monday, May 10th, 2021, and that council adopt the minutes of the general committee held on the same day. Moving the motion, I have Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Kushner, all in favor. And that is carried. Okay, the following item has been requested to move from consent. So to the clerk, I believe we already moved that one from consent. That'll be referred to the next meeting. Is that correct?
Correct. So Councillor Littleton has requested to pull item 2.4. It's the remuneration for boards and committees, and she's requested that it be pulled and referred for discussion at the shareholder meeting on June 7th.
Okay, we have a meeting. Can we just have a vote on that? So it's a referral to the shareholder meeting. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, now we have the consent agenda. So we have a motion that council approve the consent agenda, save and accept for those items brought forward for discussion. And I need a mover on the consent agenda. Councillor Williamson, seconded by Councillor Littleton. And I'll read it, send it over to the clerk for today's consent agenda.
Today's consent agenda includes item 2.1, corporate support services, renewal of contract benefits consultant. Item 2.2, financial management services, budget standing committee report, meeting of May 17th, save and accept the item for the schedule of rates and fees. Item 2.3, financial management services, budget standing committee report for May 17th, 2021. It's agenda item 10.1, the schedule and rates and fees to set the public meeting for June 14th, and item 2.5, legal and clerk services, council correspondence.
Okay, call a question.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik,
Yes.
and that's carried.
All right, thank you, Council, for that. We move on to the public meeting. So we do have a public meeting. Chief Administrative Officer will be talking about the non-resident parking beaches parking passes and amendments to the rates and fees. So this is really, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy CAO Oakes in a minute. It is a public meeting. Staff will provide the comments on the non-resident beach parking lot pass and amendments. Members of the public were provided with options to submit. No one has registered to speak. Public meeting will be closed and council make a decision. So we'll just start with the public meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Oakes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this report is a follow-up to the report from the last council meeting, which is establishing essentially a boat launch parking pass for Sunset Beach, and it's establishing a rate for those, as well as a defined number of parking spaces. So within the report, you would have read that there are only going to be 20 available for this year due to lack of parking availability and the fact that St. Catharines residents and voters would have full access to that area. So we know we have limited supply of parking stalls. So this report and this public meeting is to establish the rate for those 20 spots for the 2021 at Sunset Beach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oakes. So do we have any comments? Seeing no comments, council will close the public meeting respecting non-resident beaches and parking.
I think Councillor Garcia has his hand up.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Councillor Garcia. Got to unmute.
May I ask a question of Mr. Oakes at this time?
Sure.
Yes, just for clarification through you, Mr. Mayor. So those 20 passes at Sunset Beach, they are providing that those are available, the spaces are available because the St. Catharines residents would have priority or would have access to them, and they could potentially be using them at the time. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, that is correct. So there's a limited a number of spaces, hence the reason for just the 20 passes available.
Okay. Okay, and my second question, I think I know the answer, but just to clarify, this recommendation today relates only to the boat ramp. The $3 per hour, 3-hour parking for non-residents still stays as had been approved before. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, let's close the public meeting. So mover to close the public meeting. Councillor Cisco, Councillor Williamson, all in favor, show of hands, that's carried. And now we have the recommendation report on the floor. Who wants to make this motion? Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Porter. Do we see any further questions on the recommendation? If not, I'll call the question. Calling the question to the clerk.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Mayor Senzik,
Yes.
and that's carried.
Okay, thank you for this, Council. Appreciate that. We move on to the general committee items, discussion agenda 3.1, and this will be an update from none other than our CAO, Shelley Kpis, in her last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have a lot to say about this particular report today. Basically, you see most of what's in the report has been very much advocated in the news and media over the last little while. We are seeing the effects of the vaccination rate as the cases go down, and the number of cases in the age ranges of persons first eligible is also declining. So the provincial lockdown officially ends on June 2nd. Emergency break will continue to remain in place until the implementation of stage 1, which is targeted for June 14th. Local public health is expecting to release details later today on mass immunization clinics for youth between the ages of 12 and 17. They're aiming for one in June and one in August, and we have second shots also being booked. The rest of the report really talks about the roadmap to reopen, and I would just really want to say that different from last year, we now have the vaccination rates ramping up, so we can have all optimism that as the cases go down, as more of our population is vaccinated, we certainly will be ready to open, and City Hall will open things as soon as we possibly can safely. We'll work through those procedures. Everything is much, just a chart that's in the media right now, but we'll be going through everything and making some decisions in the Prising Council as things open. And certainly we are as anticipating as the rest of the residents are to get things open and people enjoying to socializing and using the amenities and frequenting the businesses and keeping our economy going. So basically the information in the report is there if there's any questions.
I'd just like to say thank you to the staff for getting the splash pads opened as quickly as possible. They did an outstanding job. Phil Christie and his team were working with public health to make sure that action took place. And I got to tell you, that long weekend, which was hot, it was great to see so many people utilizing the splash pads with their kids. So I just want to say thank you to the staff and Shelley and I know you and I talked Friday night about the actual splash pads, and you were confirming that they were going to be open. So great work on that. Councillor Garcia. Councillor Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd like to ask the CAO or perhaps the deputy CAO if they can clarify for the public the fact that the piers are still not officially open and will not be until provincial regulations allow it. We're getting a lot of calls about this.
I'll defer to Mr. Oakes for this one.
Thank you, Shelley. For you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The piers as it stands right now are still closed. We're waiting and working with the DFO on a date for opening, and that's again subject to the provincial emergency orders.
Thank you. And just one quick question of the CAO, Mr. for you. I noticed we extended the parking fee waiver. I assume if it's only until June 2nd, that will not be a significant impact, probably only if it continues.
Correct. We were linking those waiving of parking fees to the stay-at-home order, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Any further questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, a motion to receive the COVID update from the CAO. Councillor Harris, Councillor Dodge, and all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we now go into 3.2, I believe, which is the financial management services, Hospice Niagara funding update. We do have Carol Nagy, who is the Executive Director of Hospice Niagara. She's available to answer any questions that council members may have. And so I'm going to put the motion on the floor, if I can ask for that to be brought forward. And the motion is in front of you. I need a mover and a seconder to put it on the floor. Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Townsend. So now it's on the floor. If I can have a discussion on this motion. Councillor Kushner, you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm somewhat uncomfortable with the word long-term. To me, it should be a 5-year funding agreement. So there's no confusion regarding the length of time.
Okay, either Director Douglas, or I think you would be up for the definition of what's the difference between long-term funding and 5-year, putting a fixed term on it.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. We have used the term long-term for the funding agreement. Long-term typically is defined of anything 5 years or longer. However, if it is the purview of council, if they would like to change it to a 5-year funding agreement, then that would be fine as well.
Okay, and my second question, Mr. Mayor, is with respect to the other municipalities. My understanding was that we agreed to this subject to the other municipalities agreeing to it also. And I noticed that Niagara Falls to date has not agreed.
Okay, so I'm thinking that if I can ask that question over to Carol, if you want to provide an update to council on the delegations that you've had across the region.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Through you to council. We've had a number of delegations. We have made the request to Niagara Falls. I think right now it's a matter of timing for Niagara Falls. The pandemic has hit exceptionally hard in that city, within the tourist area and within the organizations that directly support some of that municipality's ability to commit to this type of funding. In other communities, again, I think it's a pandemic issue where they weren't offering grants at this particular time for this year. So we do have intentions on returning back to those communities as well.
Okay, Councillor Kushner.
Yeah, if that's the case, should we put in subject to agreement by the other major municipalities? Because I would hate to see the majority approving it, but a large municipality like Niagara Falls perhaps rejecting it. So I think if we put in that provision, that would put an onus on them to do likewise.
Okay, so we have two amendments that I'm hearing from Councillor Kushner. One is around the wording from long-term care funding. If that is a friendly, I'll look to the mover and a seconder.
Mr. Mayor, I'll accept the first amendment as friendly because the amount is there, non-issue.
Okay.
I will not
So just wait,
accept.
Councillor, just wait. I'm going to deal with the first one.
Yep, okay.
So if we can get the wording changed to council authorize a 5-year, I believe, Director Douglas.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. So if we can get that wording changed. And then the second one is an amendment that would relate to other area municipalities contributing to the funding of the new build in Welland and Fort Erie, I believe.
Yes.
It's Mr. Mayor, I have to respectfully decline and consider that to be very unfriendly to the recommendation.
Okay, can't speak to it right now. So That'll be an amendment that we'll deal with currently. And once, I want to see if there's going to be any other amendments. If is any other members of council going to be bringing forward amendments? If you can, please raise your hand. Just a physical hand, if you will. If there is none, then we'll deal with this one right now so that we know what we're talking about as we move through this process. So the amendment on the floor is the one we're speaking to, subject to an agreement subject to agreement by other area or Niagara municipalities to contribute to the Hospice Niagara funding request. Okay. So that's the amendment. We're only speaking to the amendment. Let me get to my list because I had a list of people speaking. So here's the list as I see it. And it's, I believe, Councillor Littleton, you had your hand up first, speaking to the amendment. If not, we'll move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will speak to this amendment because actually this was something I flagged as well. I think when we had agreed for the one-time funding request, it says right in the motion that it is contingent on the municipalities of Fort Erie and Welland contributing their per capita amount. So I think Councillor Kushner is very right to bring this forward, and I will be supporting this motion, this amendment that he has put forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Littleton. The next, I believe, and I apologize because Councillor Cisco, are you speaking to the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. My comments were going to have to do with this topic entirely, so I can make them with respect to this. I won't be supporting the amendment. I was going to make the comment that this is an opportunity for us to show some leadership within the region. It was good to read in the report that a number of other municipalities, including the Niagara region, had all supported this request. And I think this is an opportunity for the city of St. Catharines to take a leadership role. And I think that's important. We talk a lot about the region needing to be better, being supportive of municipalities, not necessarily just our own, but the municipalities throughout. We know based on the presentations we heard back in December, that this is going to benefit St. Catharines residents as well. So I think it's incumbent on us. I don't want to put any more delays in front of Hospice Niagara, the important work that they do. So I will not be supportive of the amendment. I'll be supportive of the agreement without the amendment because I think it's our opportunity to lend credence to this effort and move the process forward for Hospice Niagara.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cisco. Councillor Garcia, are you speaking to the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I would like to, through you, ask Carol Nagy if St. Catharines were to make his contribution, which was based on a per capita number, as all the others were based, but municipalities like Niagara Falls and some of the others that have declined, according to the chart, do not contribute. Can the project still go forward?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. You know, it certainly makes it difficult. We are in a stage where we're trying to fundraise. It's not a secret that, you know, there's other hospital asks that are out there that are important for our region that need to go forward. There's also some strain on donor commitments because of the pandemic for the last 2 years. When we're looking to our major company holders or donors in this area, that certainly is difficult. So it makes it difficult. We are at a point, as anybody in a capital campaign know, looking at every dollar that we have in order to move the project forward. We're trying to be as frugal in every single decision that we're making. That's why this is a project that's integrated with long-term care. And I have to say that our long-term care partners have been incredible. Foyer Richelieu and Welland is providing us 6,000 square feet of shared space that we are not going to be required to have to raise any capital funds for, or that we will be required to rent in order to use within their facility. The region has also sought out to approximately $800,000 all of the approvals on the land that they will be leasing to us for $1 a year. So, I mean, right now we've done as much as we can do, and we're really turning to municipal leaders to help us get us over the goal, that goal post, so we can continue planning these facilities and have them open as soon as possible.
Thank you for that, Carol. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I strongly support getting these extra hospice beds, but obviously we need the funding. So I am going to support Councillor Kushner's amendment because I think we do need to put the pressure on the other municipalities. And I wondered, Councillor Kushner, whether we should be more specific perhaps and say that, St. Catharines encourages all municipalities to make their per capita contribution.
Through you, Chair, if Mayor, can I just add one caveat to that? There are municipalities such as Grimsby, for example, that is supporting the expansion of 4 beds out in that area, which I can't say enough that Grimsby is supporting a hospice build, not here in Niagara, but certainly out in their jurisdictions. And I would say that that is a commitment on their part.
Councilor Garcia.
Thank you. So I had asked Mr. Mayor, Councilor Kushner, whether we should perhaps be more specific about the fact that our city strongly encourages municipalities that have not made a commitment yet to do so.
Kushner on mute. There you go.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that certainly could be put in the amendment. And furthermore,
Okay, Councilor Garcia, if you can just reiterate what you just said, it's germane to this. Include the language, what you indicated, so Maureen can get it on the screen.
Okay. Okay, so subject to contributions by other Niagara regional municipalities, and further, the city of St. Catharines strongly encourages those municipalities that have not yet committed to supporting the hospice expansion to do so.
All right. Okay, so I just want to make sure that Maureen's got that to be brought up on the screen. Maureen is our council coordinator working away at this. Just want to, okay. Great. Okay, so Councilor Kushner, you're fine with that addition. That's just to the amendment. Councilor Carlos Garcia, Councilor Garcia, you're finished?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Sorrento, I believe you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely will not be supporting this amendment. Now, we have 5 municipalities, Mr. Mayor, that have already contributed $670,000. Okay, there are 2 in the chart that have declined. However, if you look in one of the other charts with respect to the 2 communities that declined, hospice will be making another application in 2022. The other 5 municipalities, they didn't decline. It says to be determined. And I believe that hospice will be going back for the 2022 budgets. So it's not like they have said no. The other thing, Mr. Mayor, is that the Niagara region is already giving hospice $4 million. And, you know, we have a hospital here in St. Catharines that not every municipality has paid for, Mr. Mayor. However, all the great residents in the region get to use it. So I don't think that we should hold up hospice's funding requests at this point in time. I really think, even though I can't predict the future, I think that the other 5 municipalities will, the ones that have to be determined, I think that they will come through. Director Nagy already told us that Grimsby is already supporting another 4 beds. So we've got the majority of I think, the majority will be on board, in my humble opinion. I don't want to hold it up, Mr. Mayor. That's all that I have to say about the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Definitely I am in support of Hospice Niagara and what they're going to be doing in the south of Niagara. However, every municipality, including St. Catharines, has suffered through COVID, and we have made the commitment that we are going to help fund this. And I don't see any reason why a city like Niagara Falls, or any of the other ones for that matter, won't make a commitment right now. In Niagara Falls situation, granted they haven't been receiving their money from the province for the casino funding, but prior to COVID, they get $20+ million a year to fund their casino operations, which a lot of that goes towards operating their city. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to support this amendment, but it's not to say, definitely not to say that we're not going to be contributing. We just want to see what the other municipalities are going to do. And who knows, if things happen, maybe they're going to need a little bit more from us. Well, maybe that's going to happen, maybe not, I don't know. But definitely support the amendment on the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Littleton, you already spoke to this, so I'm going to go to Councillor Miller.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, I understand when we passed the motion, it included the portion about the other municipalities getting on board. I think now that some of them are already on board, I think I'd have a tough time looking myself in the face and saying we didn't support it, but Thorold and some of these other municipalities did. I think that burden is far too high to ask every single other municipality to be on board, or we pull our funding. So I'm not going to support this motion. I think this is overdue here, and we need to do what we can to support it. And I don't think it's fair to sort of have the sword of Damocles dangling over Hospice Niagara's head based on decisions that we're not even going to be involved in. So I think it's incumbent on us to show our support, as Councillor Cisco said, as leaders, and hopefully that will nudge those other municipalities along.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. And Councillor Porter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I won't be supporting the amendment. I agree with some of my colleagues that I think we need to get this done. In construction, time is money, and the longer this gets delayed, the more construction costs are going to go up, and the more families won't be able to, be part of Hospice Niagara when they need it. I had a dear friend who had to go into Hospice Niagara. She was my age, and she had 2 children and a husband whose health wasn't well either. And I think it was through the support of Hospice Niagara that allowed them to be able to kind of move on from her death in the best way possible. I'm not sure if they would have received the same kind of support if she wasn't there. So I saw firsthand the benefit to Hospice Niagara. It's also about the families who are grieving, and they provide support and they help people move on. And there's so many benefits. So I'm not going to be, I think that if we hang on and say we're going to wait, I think it provides another excuse for other municipalities to also delay their decisions, and I'm not prepared to do that. So.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Porter. Now, Councillor Littleton, you're speaking to the amendment. Is there something? Is your hand down? Or okay?
No, I have a point of order.
Okay.
So I just wanted clarification by the other Niagara regional municipalities. I thought Councillor Kushner had said Fort Erie and Welland. I just wanted to clarify that, and then I want to split the other part and the and further part.
Okay, so the request is to split what you're able to do on this amendment. There are two supporting parts to the amendment that you could split to make 2. And clarification, I'll go back to Carol in terms of, I think that's where you're directing it at, in terms of Fort Erie and Welland.
Well, Councillor Kushner had put it forward, so I just wanted to ask who he meant by the other Niagara.
Oh, sorry.
I thought it was Welland and Fort Erie that he had named.
Councillor Kushner, and I believe those 2 have already contributed. I think it's Niagara Falls that hasn't contributed yet.
Yes, and I imagine we would get a report back whether this is effective or not in encouraging the other municipalities to make a contribution, because we are saying we will make a contribution, but it's conditional. And we can talk about the merits of hospice. We're all in favor of hospice, and I'm in a good position to say, of the members of council, I will probably be the first one to make an application to be in hospice. But we're talking about conditions, and I think it's a reasonable condition, and it could very well make their case with the other municipalities that much stronger.
Okay, so we have a direction to split the motion. Councillor Littleton, because you've already spoken for a first time, so I don't want to keep going around this horseshoe on an amendment.
No, I respect that. I'm still not clear on this subject to contributions, because the report is not clear on whether Fort Erie and Welland have contributed yet. That's
Okay.
what I'm stuck on. So I can't vote on it if I don't understand what we're actually voting on. What Niagara region is it? Niagara Falls, or is it Fort Erie and Welland?
Okay, let's go over to the Executive Director of Hospice. She has all the information.
Yes, so we do have commitments from the City of Welland and from Fort Erie. We do not have that commitment from Niagara Falls.
Councillor Littleton.
Okay, then I have a question after we deal with this.
Okay, so let's split the motion. And if you can, to the council coordinator, split after municipalities. So that'll be, so you hit enter there. Okay.
So respectfully, I don't need it split anymore unless anybody else I don't want to waste anyone's time. I'm good with all of it together now.
Okay. No request for a split. Okay, I'll turn it over to the clerk to call a question on just this amendment that's in red.
And I apologize. I'm going to ask a confirmation question. I don't want there to be confusion after the fact. By Niagara regional municipalities, does the mover also include the Niagara region in that, or is that just the local area municipalities within the Niagara region?
Well, my understanding is that the Niagara region has made a commitment. Is that not correct?
I'll go over to Director Nagy.
The Niagara region has a motion before it, and that will come up to their budget of a whole in July. But they're looking at the $4 million commitment is the motion that is before Regional Council.
So they've yet to make that decision.
Correct.
And therefore, Mr. Mayor, that would also include the region.
Okay, to the clerk, do you want to put in there and the region of Niagara?
Yeah, so it'll be by other Niagara local area municipalities and the region of Niagara. Councillor Kushner?
Yes, that's correct.
Before we go to the vote to the clerk, I just have a clarification question on this one. So to the Director of Hospice, in the event that the region, so if the region doesn't provide the funding, what happens to the project? Do you have to change gears and go to the private sector to raise more funds, or what is the plan B?
The plan B would be we have to go to the private sector and raise more funds, and there could be a delay in then building the two centers of excellence.
Okay, so that is on the screen now, and we'll call that question.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
No.
Councillor Littleton?
No.
Councillor Harris?
No.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
No.
Councillor Cisco?
No.
Councillor Sorrento?
No.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Townsend?
No.
Councillor Williamson?
No.
Mayor Sendak.
No.
And that's lost.
Okay, so back to the original motion, and Councillor Williamson, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Executive Director Nagy. To the bigger question, we all know that palliative care is an essential and indispensable part of our healthcare system, and the healthcare system is supposed to be, well, funded by the federal government, delivered by the provincial government, and yet you're forced, in my view, in a sort of a disrespectful way, to have to come hand in hand to municipalities who generate a revenue, as you well know, from property taxpayers, and we're not really flush with cash and able to assume extra responsibilities. So my question is the national or provincial organization of palliative care facilities, are you advocating to provincial governments, mainly the provincial governments, to fund you, include you in the health system like you should be included?
Thank you, through you, Chair. We absolutely are advocating for the capital investment grant that the provincial government provides to these two new hospice builds. I'm very encouraged by our last discussions, and we'll be hopefully announcing provincial support shortly for both of these builds. And secondly, there's a new bill that we also worked with the provincial government to pass that will look at palliative care as part, as you say, of our healthcare structure and as a required element of that. So we now have a framework that the provincial government has passed, and we're looking at how that will translate into more equitable access to service, which means we have to have more services available, which means provincial funding.
Good. Let's hope that happens. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just some questions about when I was reading the report and then seeing that we're authorizing a 5-year funding agreement. I understand. So clearly, you know, I'm hearing that Welland and Fort Erie have agreed, but I'm fuzzy on what they're doing. Is it that amount there, that 255, that is what they're doing? That's what you asked for, and that's what they're doing. I don't know why this is so hard for me.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we asked every municipality on a per capita basis according to their 2016 census. So that's where we derived the numbers, excuse me, just so that it was equitable, what we saw across all of the municipalities. However, the two municipalities where we are building the hospices, right now we're in design. We have to go for any municipal adjustments. We're hoping, of course, that they will be friendly to any of those adjustments. I've spoken to both of the mayors around development fees, asking for reductions in development fees where that's possible according to their policies. So I am sure those two communities, and having worked with those mayors directly, will also be providing any other support for these two important facilities to be built in those areas.
Thank you. And just through the mayor to yourself, Ms. Nagy, these aren't necessarily standalone buildings that you're talking about. They're in other facilities, like you said, the foyer. Is that correct? Maybe I haven't understood this from the beginning, but you're creating beds in a space that exists. Have I got it?
And you're right. This is a little bit confusing. In Welland, it is a brand new long-term care home that Foyer Richelieu, a not-for-profit long-term care provider, is building. We have approximately 3/4 of the first floor that's dedicated to hospice beds and then hospice programming. So that is within their building, but it'll be a distinct area of their building, separate entrance altogether. And then in Fort Erie, it is a parcel of land on the new Gilmore Lodge site. So we will have a standalone building in Fort Erie.
Okay, thanks for answering my question.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton, Councillor Sorrento, and then Councillor Garcia.
Can I speak last, Mr. Mayor?
Why'd you put your hand up then?
I thought it was last.
Councillor Garcia. You're up.
Never mind.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm okay with Councilor Sorrento be last. Just a follow-up question through you to Ms. Nagy. Following up on what Councillor Williamson asked about provincial and other government support, great to hear that you think you're close to getting that. My question is, Council also passed a motion unanimously, I believe, that I had made to ask the provincial government to fund your healthcare workers. Any progress in that file?
I don't have any progress on that directly, except to know that certainly our provincial association, Hospice Palliative Ontario, continues along the same lines that the letter that the City of St. Catharines provided, looking for full funding for all of our clinical staff. We are the only healthcare provider without that full funding to our staff. So we continue to advocate. And the letter we received from the City of St. Catharines is certainly helpful in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Sorrento, you are the last to speak.
All right, thank you,
want me to
Mr.
speak
Mayor.
after you, though? I'm just gonna, because I'm gonna say some comments, but I'll leave it since you want to be the last to speak. Do you want to speak last?
Penultimate is good, Mr. Mayor, and yes, I'll allow you to speak last. That's no problem.
Okay.
To Executive Director Nagy, did you say that you're waiting for an announcement from the province with regard to funding, Director Nagy?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We're waiting for final confirmation so that we can look at making any announcement that we can.
And just for your operating budget, doesn't the provincial government fund half of your budget or a third of your budget?
60% of our budget, 60% of our staffing costs are covered by provincial funding, and everything else we provide on fundraised dollars.
Nice to know that the province is supporting you, and maybe we can work on bumping that up. And now just a couple of words, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank staff for this report, all of our friends at Hospice, Council for passing it last year. I think there's, I really don't need to say anything anymore. It's already been said. So a heartfelt thank you to everybody, and let's get this through. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And just in terms of sort of some history for this, because I think for the public to understand, and I think what Councillor Williamson and Councillor Garcia and Councillor Sorrento have talked about in terms of the funding, because when we do fund these projects, we're moving away from what our core responsibility is as municipalities. And so every time we get pulled in this direction, you're letting the province off the hook, if you will. And it's not just this, I'm not talking about this term. There's been a lot of previous terms of government provincially that have neglected hospice and not seen the important role that they play in our community. So this isn't a one-term thing. This is multi-years of advocating for trying to get the province to see the importance of hospice care in communities. That being said, and I know I've talked to Carol about this, when the building was built in St. Catharines, and the public needs to understand this because this is why I support this motion, the City of St. Catharines didn't put a dime into it. In fact, it was, I think they waived maybe $1,000 in planning fees. So just think about that. So we have this facility in our community, and the City of St. Catharines didn't put anything into it. It was up to the business community and the volunteers working for hospice to go and raise all the money to build that facility in St. Catharines that has proven to be so valuable for our residents, not just here in St. Catharines, but from across the region. So I support this because even though our funds are being directed to Welland and Fort Erie, the reality is it'll also open up space for St. Catharines people in St. Catharines, because the pressures that Hospice Niagara are feeling are from the fact that more and more people from outside of St. Catharines are using Hospice Niagara. So increasing the bed allotment will allow for more people to access the space, which is very important. And the reality is that we didn't contribute back in 2003. So this is our opportunity to contribute. I hope Niagara Falls sees this opportunity. I know Welland and Fort Erie have seen the importance of it. So I'm honored to support this, but I do want to thank councillors who have worked hard on this. This is all your testament, and it's to Carol and her team for coming forward. So with that, I'll just call the question to the city clerk.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
and Mayor Sensick.
Yes.
That's carried.
All right. Thanks, Carol. Appreciate the presentation, and good luck on your fundraising. And tell Niagara Falls that we'll be watching.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. This is a wonderful night for us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, 3.3, engineering and facilities, environmental services. So members of council were asked to submit questions to staff by May 26th, so staff could prepare a memo, and there was no questions submitted. So this would be a presentation by Olivia Groff, who is the Climate Change Adaptation Coordinator, to make a presentation on another important subject matter to our community. Ms. Groff. Welcome.
Am I able to share my screen here? It says this will stop others from sharing. Is that okay if I press that?
Yep, you can go ahead.
Okay. All right. So good evening, Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Olivia Groff, and I am the Climate Change Adaptation Coordinator with the City of St. Catharines. Tonight, I'll be presenting the draft Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan for your consideration. This presentation will review the recommendation to Council, the plan's purpose and development, the climate policy, some examples of actions, and next steps. From Council declaring a climate emergency and a strategic plan that now specifically includes climate change, the recommendation to Council tonight is to adopt the climate policy, approve the climate adaptation plan, authorize staff to begin implementation. And just for some background, there are two principal areas of climate change. Mitigation is focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Examples include energy savings and efficiencies, along with sustainable transportation. And adaptation, on the other hand, is aimed to minimize or prevent the negative impacts of climate change by responding proactively towards associated risks. Examples include cooling centers for residents and updating stormwater infrastructure. And adaptation was the focus of this plan. So we know we need to adapt to the future climate. Despite our efforts to reduce emissions, we need to ensure we are prepared for the impacts of a changing climate. Climate change is a global issue. However, the effects are experienced here at the local level, making municipalities the first to respond. Just as COVID-19 has exposed multiple crises, climate change will inherently as well. Consideration of what's been called green recovery is important. And as many of you have likely heard, the principles or ideas of building back better, or a newer term, build smart to start, has been emerging to think not just for today, but for the future. One reason to be proactive is to consider the economic benefits. Research shows that for every dollar invested in pre-disaster adaptation activities, up to $6 can be saved in post-disaster recovery spending. This plan started from 3 key inputs. The first was securing a Federation of Canadian Municipalities grant that allowed the city to hire a climate change adaptation coordinator. Second, Brock University formed a collaborative called Niagara Adapts with 7 participating municipalities within the Niagara region. And third, the city developed an interdepartmental climate adaptation team who all helped to inform and develop this plan. The plan was developed through a variety of resources, supports, collaboration, and best practices. FCM helped using community of practice activities, workshops, and coaching resources. The local support from Niagara Adapts and the use of the ICLEI BARC milestone framework allowed us to track our progress and follow adaptation planning best practices. The climate adaptation team helped inform the internal corporate knowledge to produce a relevant local plan. And lastly, engagement was also very important. Both internal and external stakeholders were involved with 3 formal public engagements taking place. The foundation of the plan was informed using climate projection data to evaluate the future impacts of climate change here in St. Catharines. The projections indicate that St. Catharines will experience warmer and wetter winters, longer and wetter springs, hotter summers, along with shorter falls. This data informed our understanding of the climate impacts to St. Catharines, which were assessed under a risk and vulnerability assessment. The outcomes from the assessment led to 12 top impacts under 4 common themes, which were increased heat, heavy rain events, overall increased rain, and extreme events. The good news is St. Catharines already has a number of adaptation practices in place. During extreme heat, we have cooling centers. For heat and rain impacts, we already have the Urban Forestry Management Plan with progress underway. For concerns and issues related to heavy rain events, the city offers grants for basement flood protection. And most recently, the impacts of COVID have made the city more resilient in terms of our business continuity practices and operations. This is progress, but instead of being reactive to a singular event, we need to take a proactive approach to multiple possible future events. The climate policy was created to act as the foundation to the plan and provide a framework to aid the city's climate change thinking. The policy is made up of a vision, a mission, 6 goals that are closely tied to the climate impacts, and 12 guiding principles. A few guiding principles include to be forward-looking, evidence-based, embrace the natural environment, continually evolve, and encourage climate leadership. Using the climate policy as a framework and building from adaptation practices currently in place, we can improve municipal measures towards a more adaptive and resilient future. This plan was created with a corporate focus, which is why I'd like to highlight goal number 6, rethink how the city addresses climate change. Many actions under this goal support adaptation and mitigation efforts. To highlight a few actions under this goal, a primary action is to establish a green interdepartmental team to continue to lead the city towards a climate resilient future. To continue and advance energy and greenhouse gas savings by utilizing a green reserve fund to leverage city funding along with available incentives and grants. The asset management plan has opportunities to incorporate climate change as well as including green infrastructure. These all demonstrate what the city can do to address climate change through a lead by example approach. The next steps of this plan will be to move into implementation with ongoing monitoring of the actions, share progress and accomplishments as they occur, create a terms of reference for the green team, and reevaluate and update the plan in 5 years to track the plan's overall progress and success. So in conclusion, the city now has a local climate adaptation plan that has been developed through collaboration, best practices, and engagement, a climate policy that will help guide future decision-making, a course for action outlined in the implementation schedule of the plan, and lastly, all of these items fulfill the FCM grant deliverables. Thank you again, Mayor and City Council, for your attention and the opportunity to present to you all this evening, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gross. Bit of a feedback, that's fine. Great presentation, and really there was a request for councillors to submit questions in advance of a detailed nature, so I'm sure you're going to be getting comments here on the presentation. but you've done an outstanding job. And we have Mark Green, who is the manager of environmental services here at the City of St. Catharines. He has taken a leadership role on that file as well when it comes to climate change. So I'll look to, we got a couple of comments from councillors. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to city staff. And that was a good presentation. It's good to see that we've started. We've got a long way to go, that's for sure. Perhaps to Mr. Green, when we have developers come in wanting to build subdivisions or large buildings, whatever, are we going to put in front of them expectations as far as greening their sites, for example, permeable bricks instead of asphalt or whatever? Will there be specific expectations that these developers will have to meet before they will get site plan approval?
Thank you, through the mayor, to you. Basically, this plan specifically doesn't do that, but it does recommend implementing a stormwater management plan, and including with that specifically what we call low impact development. It can also be called green infrastructure or natural infrastructure, but it's ways of kind of using nature to kind of help us out, and that's really important for stormwater management. So a lot of the rainwater can hit, as you mentioned, either pervious surfaces or vegetated surfaces to kind of soak into the ground and doesn't run off nearly as quickly. So that is totally in line with this plan. The risk assessment part of the climate adaptation plan did identify that with climate change, we are expecting to have more rainfall and more intense rainfall. So we definitely need to have measures to help address that.
Personally, I think that's vital because, as you know, especially in the north end in Walker's Creek, and we had a major flooding situation that we dealt with a few years ago. Walker's Creek is overflowing on a regular basis, it seems, anymore. We have a new subdivision going in Port Weller East, and they just did the services there, and there's a big pipe that's pouring water into, there's going to be pouring water into a creek that already floods. And if we want to, we can do everything we want to try and mitigate from our standpoint. But if the developers don't come along with us, and if we don't put expectations upon them, it's good money after bad. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And like Councillor Phillips and yourself, I wanted to thank staff and particularly Ms. Groff for that presentation. That was excellent. And I'm so impressed that you got such a heavy duty subject in the 5 minutes or so. That was very well done. My question relates, and I'm sorry I didn't send this in advance. I was just thinking about it. When reading through the plan as submitted, flood prevention strategy is going to be a critical action proposed to adapt in the future. And I know that one of the areas that were mentioned was ensuring that waterfront park amenities are above high lake levels. So I just wanted to ask through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps to Director Martuscio. I mentioned earlier at an earlier meeting when we talked about the repaving of just recent repaving of the Lakeside Park parking lot, that it will all have to be reconfigured and redone in the not too distant future as part of whatever happens to Main Street and Lakeport and so on. So through you to Director Martuscio, will that reconstruction at that time incorporate raising the level of the parking lot below the paving so that when we do have the next flood, and I'm sure we will, the parking lot doesn't fill with water as it has a couple of years ago?
For you, Mr. Mayor, maybe I'll start with that and then I'll let Mark follow up with some more detail. We were just recently successful in applying for funding through FCM, I believe, to identify risks along the lakefront for city assets. And one of the items that we will be identifying through that funding opportunity is what effects the various levels of the lake will have on amenities at Lakeside Park and Sunset Beach and other city-owned amenities along the lakeside. But I'll let Mark get into a little more detail with regards to what that funding application entailed.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. This is the exact type of thing that this climate adaptation plan is trying to foster, is to think ahead. So if we're going to invest in new infrastructure, not designing it for historically how the weather used to be and how our climate used to be, what we can expect in the future. So the city is looking to undertake basically a study to look at public infrastructure near the lake, and it's a bit of a risk assessment in terms of, we know things might need to be addressed, but how to do that. Obviously, the parking lot you could raise to any level, but there's no point having a parking lot that's well above water if the rest of the park is underwater, for example. So there's kind of a risk reward there, but definitely making sure at the early stage of these projects, those type of considerations are being made, because that's the time to do it. If you're going to redo the parking lot, what elevation should it be? So we're just at the early stages now, but that's exactly the type of question that this climate adaptation plan is going to hopefully kind of sprinkle throughout a whole bunch of decision making throughout the city in the foreseeable future.
Thank you for that, Anthony and Mark. And as a follow-up to that question, it will be important that we liaise with the region in some of these strategies, because, for example, Lakeside Park, we have that sewage pumping station right there, and obviously that has to be taken care of to make sure that if there is a flood, that we don't have a problem with it, as well as whatever we have. And to your comment on the park, no question that we have to be careful about the whole park, but I mentioned the parking lot particularly because when we did have the highest water, most of the park, except, I say not at the shoreline, obviously, but inland, it wasn't as bad as the parking lot. But obviously, most of it will have to be raised as well. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Porter, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a really well done report, and I hope the community reads it, and it's beautiful. Actually, it's even the design. It's one of the nicest looking reports that has come. So I just want to comment on that. In looking at the goals and the KPIs, like, I'm always concerned about really good reports and plans kind of being shelved in a way or not coming back to council. So can you describe, I guess this is to Manager Green, can you describe like the next steps in terms of developing the KPIs and how the asset management consultant, have they seen this yet? And are you working together with them to incorporate what's in this plan in our asset management plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess I would say yes, definitely. In terms of the asset management plan, climate change is kind of considered in that. There's some assets it'll be more relevant for than others. Certainly, all of our our water system, our wastewater system, our stormwater systems, those are certainly the obvious ones. But it will affect a number of things, and it will also include some of our more natural infrastructure as well, even though that's not in this phase of the asset management plan, but it will be coming in the future. In terms of the KPIs, I think as Olivia mentioned in the presentation, one of the next steps is putting together this kind of interdepartmental team to kind of look at and not just climate change, but all of our kind of environmental sustainability pieces. We kind of struggled. We a number of reports have requested that before, but we don't want to have a a team that deals with energy conservation and a different staff team that deals with greenhouse gas emissions and a different staff team that deals with adaptation action. So it's going to kind of be a bit holistic, and part of that will be of that team's mandate will be to help develop these KPIs and make sure we're tracking things, and putting the systems in place so we can track them going forward, not after the fact trying to look back and be like, okay, so how many, for example, how many residents used a cooling center last year? Obviously you have to have staff tracking that over time, so we can see do we need more cooling centers? Do we need to promote them differently? Are they in the right locations? And yeah, we definitely need KPIs to drive those type of decisions.
Okay, so I'm just a question to staff. When do we think that these KPIs will be developed and finished? I'm trying to figure out what the relation would be to council strategic plan. Like, I think that we would need to take a look at this again when we're making budget decisions, right? This needs to come back in front of council somehow, so that we can really make the required investments. I'm just trying to figure out how we can take this and make sure that we make it work.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the KPIs won't necessarily all be done at the same time. It's different of the different projects. Some might be easier to do than others. Some we may already have the data for and systems in place, and that might be quite simple. Other ones, it might be more complicated. We might have to have different procedures in place or investments in technology or who knows what to be able to do that. So I can't give you an answer right now. It's not like they're going to be done on a certain date, but certainly we can keep council informed of them.
Thank you. So we all know this is a climate adaptation plan. It's not a climate change mitigation plan. I'm just wondering if staff are, we do our energy demand management plan, I think it's called, but I think there are other things that the municipality could do around climate change related to city planning, for example, looking at our investments in our transportation master plan and how reducing, car travel does have an impact on greenhouse gases, even though those are private things. They're not the city's vehicles, but they're private vehicles. How we design and develop the city has a huge impact. Is there going to be, it's a lot to ask right now. I'm not asking for this today, but is this going to be a focus of staff as well to look at this holistically? The federal government just released a grant program, for example, for people to invest in reducing greenhouse gas emissions from their house by giving them money for windows and things like that, so, which I think this is something that we could be promoting as a city as well. Is that something that staff has a capacity to look at some point in the future? Are we thinking about having some kind of mitigation goals, maybe not a whole plan, but some more mitigation goals?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, all city plans are obviously referenced anytime we do any work within the city. The CDMP, the Conservation Demand Management Plan that you're referencing, set out targets for us to reduce greenhouse gases as well as our utility usage. A plan that encompasses everything, I don't think that is in our current work plan. However, we are referencing our TMP. There's updates to the official plan that will be done, and the initiatives that have been outlined in this adaptation plan address some of those cross the departmental projects that staff will be working on to improve our overall environmental stewardship as a corporation.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. I just want to thank staff for this very excellent plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is about adaptation, but I think it's it's leading to some work on mitigation. And I don't know if the climate change adaptation coordinator or the manager would like to speak to that. But let me just, in terms of, we're supposed to be looking at everything through climate change lens now. And how far are we along the track where every decision that we make is measuring environmental impact? And the acronym I would use would be GHA, ecological footprint or carbon footprint. To me is as, if not more important than financial figures or KPI indexes or some of those other issues. Like, where are we? And it can't be really an evolution. It's got to happen pretty fast in the process where this is, explicitly part of every decision that we make. And how are we faring against other municipalities, I guess would be my question. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can maybe start for sure. So there's in this plan, there's some recommendations. So part of it is encouraging like an update to our procurement policy, looking at green procurement. So then essentially anytime the city purchases something, it does take that lens, looking at the environmental impact of that purchasing decision, for example. So I think that will definitely help move us in the direction that you're talking about. We also had mentioned kind of the asset management plan when we're looking at new assets. In terms of rehabilitating, are we replacing them? How, what specs should we be building those to? Getting climate change considered in that decision making. So that those things this plan is kind of pushing us towards, I would say.
Good, thank you, and I'll echo my colleagues' appreciation for the hard work that that you've done over the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson, Councillor Kushner, and then last up, Councillor Miller.
Yes, my questions have been answered, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, I'll echo. Thanks for your report. I think it's really exciting to see how much thinking went into it and how many people worked on it together. So I don't have much to say about it. I did have a question about. I know around the demand management plan, there was some question from the community about how we are communicating some of this information. How we are letting the public know what the city does, because it's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of considerations being made all the time, and I'm really excited that our reports have environmental implications on them now, for example. So it is top of mind. How are we presenting this plan to the public? I guess I should ask.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start with that, and then maybe if Mark wants to add to that. So the plan will be going on our city website for reference by everyone. Our plan is to come back to council with regular updates with regards to status on how we're doing with regards to the recommendations set out in this plan, but not only this plan, but probably also the CDMP and other initiatives that were taken across the city. So we do plan on coming back to council probably yearly with updates on the status of how the city's performing in accordance with what we've recommended. And part of that green team will probably be a communications component where we'll improve information that is getting out to inform the public of the strides that the city is making as environmental stewards.
I think if we're looking at, obviously, I'm not going to direct staff on this. This is up to them. But if we're looking at redoing the website, I would love to see us do a portal like we do with Engage STC. We have this hashtag, green STC or whatever we were using for this as like a landing spot where the public can see adaptation, mitigation, all the different things we're doing. Because again, it's about showing leadership. And I think, it hopefully nudges others to start doing their part as well. So yeah, no, thanks. And I know that's a bit down the road, but I guess that would be a note maybe. Anyway, thank you. And thanks again. Wonderful report.
Okay, thanks for all the comments. And I think Councillor Miller is correct. Just share a quick story where an individual had indicated that we actually didn't do much on climate change and climate mitigation and offsetting. And I asked Mark and his team to put together everything we've done in the past number of years to address this issue. And it was quite a lengthy email. And the reply back from the individual in the community was, I had no idea that so much work had already been done. And so speaking to Councillor Miller's point, we got to do a better job of communicating that, because I got to tell you, the staff have done a lot of work, and it's all foundational stuff that you might not see right away, but it's going to start to show itself because the policies and the procedures are being put into place that will allow for pushing back at climate change, mitigation strategies, all the things that we've been talking about as a council. So to the entire team, thanks for all the work that you're doing, but more importantly, let's start telling the community more about what we're doing so they can start changing their habits as well while we're making changes internally at the corporation. So thanks to the entire team. Who wants to move? I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor Williamson, who himself says he is the greenest councillor on council. Maybe that was.
I don't recall saying that.
Maybe that was last term, councillor. All right, I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Krishner,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
and Mayor Sensick.
Yes.
That's carried.
Okay, thank you very much. We go 3.4, community recreation, culture services, business planning. So this is a opportunity to recognize Richard Pierpoint. Prior to discussing the motion, council will hear from a delegate. We have Miss Rochelle Bush from, everyone would know, from Salem Chapel as well. Also a very well-known historian here in Niagara who has an abundance of knowledge about the history in our community, specifically the Black history, but also the abolition history together as society was working towards helping Harriet Tubman. And she is a fascinating individual with a wealth of information. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ms. Bush, for your delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council, and good evening to you as well, Mr. Mayor, as well as staff. So on behalf of the Salem Chapel BME Church, we are grateful that city staff offer no objections or immediate concerns with regards to renaming Centennial Gardens or another amenity in honor of Richard Pierpoint. So also, we are grateful that Fire Services offers no concerns. So I'm here tonight to speak to the report suggestion of possibly naming another amenity or facility instead of renaming the entire park after Richard Pierpoint. So for about 170 years, the area was called Dix Creek, and then it became Centennial Gardens. So Pierpoint arrived in 1780, and as we know, he was a member of Butler's Rangers. So as you know, after the American War of Independence, Pierpoint was a Black loyalist. He received 200 acres of land in modern-day St. Catharines, the Meryton Ward. So part of the land is where the Centennial Gardens now is located. So he served in the War of 1812. For his service as a defender of Upper Canada, he received 100 acres of land in Garifaxa. So that was around 1820 and 21 that he received that. So it's now Fergus, Ontario. Pierpoint died in either 1837 or 38. He spent at least 42 years of his adult life here in St. Catharines. Today, he's known as the most famous Black loyalist in Upper Canada and most likely the country. And that's because he was a member of Butler's Rangers, his service to the Crown, and his service during the War of 1812. As you know, a federal building in London, Ontario is named after him. He's a person of national importance, and the Canadian Embassy in Senegal was renamed in his honor this year. The staff report states that it is common for parks to include recognition of multiple events and or individuals. The example provided is that Central Park in New York City includes Strawberry Fields, which is the memorial to John Lennon. In New York City, both names coexist, and the importance of that tradition And it's important that both coexist equally and are equally recognized. So, hoping that council is considering honoring Richard Pierpoint, we ask that you do not reduce him to a footnote locally by naming a park pavilion or something else after him instead of the entire park. Richard Pierpoint is deserving of the park name change, the entire park. So if the two are to coexist, we would be in favor of signage within the park that would pertain to the history of Centennial Gardens. We also welcome the return of the totem pole because one of our local traditions is that Richard Pierpoint received the nickname Paw Pine from Indigenous people. So he was a true son of Africa, which means he was African born. And they often engaged with Indigenous people or they lived amongst them. Most importantly, what brings me here tonight, we ask that council does not consider renaming a section of the Merritt Trail after Richard Pierpoint. Absolutely no way. We completely reject that idea because we hold Merritt, William Hamilton Merritt, in high regard. When he lived, he was our primary community benefactor. Pierpoint served with him during the War of 1812, and more importantly, they were friends, they were colleagues. That's it. We hope that council supports the name change for the entire park, and we hope the community does as well. I thank you all kindly for your time tonight.
Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. And are there any questions of the presenter here tonight? All right, Ms. Bush, again, thank you very much, and for all the work that you're doing at Salem Chapel as well. A very important national historical site here in St. Catharines that deserves all of our attention. So we'll now, I need a mover to just receive Ms. Bush's presentation. Councillor Garcia, seconded by Councillor Phillips, all in favor? That is carried. And now we go to the recommendation report. Councillor Littleton, the floor is yours, as I believe you have a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion. I'm just going to, thank you. I had written out a longer motion, so I'm just going to make some points before this is presented. And I'm just going to my other screen here. Apologies. So I wanted to just raise, first of all, I wanted to thank Rochelle for bringing this forward. It's such an important topic. It's so important that we also recognize historical figures, but that we also recognize Black people in our community, because we haven't done that. And I mean, in this city, we haven't really done that either. And I think that this is a great opportunity to do that as well. And I wanted to also mention that when we had sent this forward, when Rochelle had brought this forward, we had asked, you know, would the Heritage Advisory Committee look into this and provide some feedback? Well, they passed a motion unanimously supporting the renaming of Centennial Gardens after Richard Pierpoint. The Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee endorsed the Heritage Committee's motion unanimously. The Anti-Racism Advisory Committee endorsed the Heritage Advisory Committee's motion unanimously. I think that the city of St. Catharines is striving also to, as I mentioned, recognize historical figures, and we need to continue to work towards being a more inclusive and diverse community. So my motion is to ask that the city of St. Catharines begin the public process to rename Centennial Gardens. And in that process, you have Richard Pierpoint Park as one of the options. So I want to be clear that we're going through the public process, and that's what we're following. But also, as Rochelle has mentioned, in the staff report, staff had talked about these, you could have multiple assets named within one asset being the park. But what I would rather do is flip that and say, for those folks who feel the connection to the name Centennial, although the report accurately acknowledges that the library downtown is the Centennial Library. that perhaps the pavilion could be named the Centennial Pavilion or something, that we look at that. So we flip it so that we could have something in the park recognizing Canada's centennial and the historical part of how that park came to be. So that's also what we're asking there. Also noted in the report, and I think is very important, that consideration be given for additionally recognizing our Indigenous community within the park. So that's why that is there. And that the city reach out to the Queenston Neighbours Community Group, of which the park is of great importance to the community group. The gardens are in there, which is not operated, but was really, spearheaded by the group for their support, as well as other community groups as part of the public process. So that's the motion tonight before you. And I guess we'll discuss. Thank you.
Okay, just to set the table for the discussion, because this is really the council, if council's decision is to do this process, it's to start the process. So unless you adamantly don't want the name Richard Pierpoint Park in the process, really this is just voting on starting the process to ask the community what would they prefer. So I don't want to get bogged down in it. I don't think it should be renamed. If that's your position, you'll have an opportunity when it comes back from public input. So I want to be very clear on that. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly will support the motion. I wanted to thank Rochelle for that excellent presentation. Regarding point number 3, in terms of additionally recognizing our Indigenous community, I want to emphasize that the staff have been working hard in terms of the plans for restoring the totem pole that was tied to 1960 or 67 and the centennial, and that I believe, perhaps Director Christie can comment, but I believe it's still in storage. It was, the initial thought was to let it dry up before it could be restored. And we have an Indigenous specialist from out west where the totem pole was initially crafted, already contracted to do the restoration. And I think we're waiting because of the pandemic and the travel restrictions.
Okay, so I don't think we need to go into that much detail because as Councillor Littleton, it's in her ward with Councillor Miller. They've been following that along and they're very aware of that development. I think that there, Councillor, the point number 3 is really just the recognizing of the community within the park, which staff will do during the process. So we don't need to go into the detail. Director Christie, if you can do it in 20 words or less.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the totem pole is still in storage. The person that we had contracted to do a condition assessment wasn't able to travel because of COVID, and that is the reason for the delay.
Okay, thank you, Director Christie. Okay, thanks, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just want to thank Rochelle Bush for all the work that she's done, and she's talked about Richard Pierpoint to a lot of us for a long time, and I'm happy to see this come to council. I also want to thank Councillor Littleton, who spearheaded this and brought some members of the Black community together to hear from them, to begin reviewing what we could do, how we could put Richard Pierpoint's name on something. And I was able to sit in one of those meetings, and I heard from a young Black man who said, there's nothing in this community that there's no monuments, or there's nothing that I can look at where I can see myself. So I think this is incredibly important. The newspaper article came out on the weekend, and I wasn't expecting it to come out, and I shared it and honestly braced myself for blowback, because change is hard for people, but I was honestly very surprised by the community, who seem to overwhelmingly support this idea already. So I just want to put that out there, that some consultation has already happened, and it just feels like the right move. So Thank you to everybody.
You'll be seconding it, Councillor Porter, I believe. Okay, Councillor Kushner, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make it a bit stronger with respect to point 1, taking out as one of the options. I think we would, that way we would consider renaming it to Richard Pierpoint, period.
Okay, so I have to ask the mover, because the mover is Councillor Littleton, and it is a public process. Councillor Littleton, over to you.
See, that's what we're stuck on, is I'm the first one to say we need to go through the public process. And what was the public process? And this is just following that public process. So we're essentially saying as council, we're putting this forward, just like the Neil Peart, pavilion was named. We're putting this forward as council, saying we think this is a worthy individual. Community, what do you think? But along that public process, members of the public do have opportunity to bring other names forward. So it's a tough one, but I'm a stickler for public process and transparency.
Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would prefer that out, but given the explanation, I think the intent is there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Kushner. And seeing no other speakers, again, well done all around. I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes.
Councillor Cisco?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Townsend?
Yep.
Mayor
Yes.
Senzik?
Yes.
And that's carried.
To Director Christie, in terms of the process from start to finish, how long do you anticipate this coming back to council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we spoke about it internally this afternoon, and we're thinking in about 3 months' time, we should have a fulsome report for council.
Thank you. Okay. Now we move on to motions to ratify forthwith. We have council adopt these items approved forthwith by general committee on Monday, May 31st, 2021. Can I have a motion to ratify? Councillor Townsend, Councillor Phillips, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, we do have a number of motions, folks. I am just gonna, for those who are making delegations, we are keeping you to 5 minutes. I know some have presented at the region, which is more generous with their time. They give 10 minutes. We are at 5. I will be strictly enforcing the 5. So I wanted everyone to know that in advance. And at the 5-minute mark, I will just interrupt, ask you to wrap up quickly and move on. So, because we do have a lot of individual motions here being brought forward by councillors that has drawn out some delegations, which is always good, but we got to make sure we set the parameters so we can keep this order of business moving forward. The first one is the endorsement of a petition seeking a federal study on the merits of declaring a national emergency on mental health. We have a speaker we have a delegation, Mr. Stephen Seuss, who will be speaking. And again, Mr. Seuss, reminder, 5 minutes and you will be halted.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. Tonight I am presenting on petition E3351. It is a motion, it's a petition that I authored, and it's being endorsed by Dean Allison, the MP for Niagara West, and it's calling on the House of Commons Standing Committee to launch a the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health to launch a study on the merits of declaring a national emergency on mental health. Now, if you recall, St. Catharines Council plus 10 other local Niagara area municipalities have already supported a similar motion. They supported the request for Niagara Regional Council to declare an emergency on mental health, homelessness, and addiction. And Chair, I thank them for that as well. Unfortunately, it wasn't the will of the region to carry forward with that, but it got municipalities talking about these issues where they might have not have been before. And so I'm proud of that work, and I'm proud of all the councils who supported this. So now I want to challenge the federal government to do more. We understand how it works. It's been actually mentioned in this meeting that the federal government is in charge of healthcare transfers to the province. And so we have a system in Ontario that is underfunded by $1.5 billion for mental health care. The Canadian economy loses $51 billion per year, and that's according to CAMH, from lost productivity and healthcare costs due to mental health. In terms of Niagara Statistics, 14% of our secondary students have stated that they have seriously considered suicide. That's alarming to me. Our suicide rate in Niagara is higher than the provincial average. The province is 7.7. We are over 9%. So this is an emergency. And there's a recent Morneau Shepherd poll that states that 50% of Canadians report that their mental health has worsened under COVID-19. So we have to now take action and bring this to the national spotlight. As a Métis person, suicide rate is double amongst Métis people and 9 times higher amongst Inuit communities. So that's also according to National Statistics Canada. So I want to compel council tonight to support this course of action and to make sure that we stay on this issue and challenge the federal government to do more. Because at the end of the day, it's either we pay now or we pay later, council. That's what it comes down to. We're losing a lot of money in this economy by not properly taking care of these issues. And I think it's all levels of government responsibility to make sure that we do this. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to follow your very courteous 5-minute rule, and I'm going to end it there because I think that this petition is self-explanatory, but I'm going to leave council with the 3 S's: support, share, and sign the petition. And I am hoping that Madam Clerk will distribute the petition to individual councillors and anyone else interested that you as councillors and Mr. Mayor come across for supporting this such an important petition. So far, Pelham, Thorold, and West Lincoln have passed it unanimously, with more hopefully to come. Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor and Council, for allowing me the opportunity to speak on such an important thing.
Thank you, Mr. Seuss. Greatly appreciated. And any questions of the presenters speaking on this motion? All right, seeing no, Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Seuss, for your presentation. I think a lot of us have, lots of personal stories about mental illness or how it affected us or our families. One of the things that's kind of not been mentioned is like some of the underlying drivers. We're just talking about mental illness in general, but not what really drives mental illness or worsens it or even contributes to it. Things like poverty, the gap between, widening gap between wealthy and people who are struggling to pay rent, affordable housing. I'm just wondering why you haven't mentioned any of those really important factors. You're just kind of talking about a crisis, but not the actual underlying crises that is contributing to a lot of mental illness right now.
Well, Councillor Porter, I was being very mindful of the chair's time limit there, but it is outlined, and I do outline in the wording of the petition, if you had a chance to review that, of the youth hospitalizations, the skyrocketing addiction rates. Of course, the original motion that was co-authored between myself and Councillor Wayne Campbell of Niagara Falls, it dived into the issues of homelessness and addiction. I've been a huge advocate for that. I've been front and center on that, talking about it on my own political web show, True Politics. So I'm very much aware of those situations, and it's all interconnected. I am a person who lives with depression, anxiety, so I understand some of the intricacies around it. As well, I've spent time in the developmental services sector, so I've worked with a lot of it firsthand. So I appreciate your question, Councillor Porter, but I have been front and center on all this. And that was through the chair. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. It was just wanting to be mindful. It's, you know, if I'm going to vote for this, it's not because my overall concern is about economic productivity. It's really about addressing the underlying crises. And I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit. Thank you.
I agree with you, Councillor.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Seuss, thank you very much for your presentation. A motion to receive the presentation by Mr. Seuss. Councillor Miller, Councillor Dodge, all in favor? That's carried. And we go to the motion, and the motion to the floor is Councillor Townsend. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank Mr. Seuss for his advocacy when it comes to mental health. We know that it's been a tough year for many with this pandemic. We know mental health is, it's not a party politic issue. It's an issue that everyone is affected by. We do need to do more, not just federally, but provincially as well, and even municipally. So we're going to continue to fight for more healthcare funding. We do hope that that all levels of government do take this seriously, and we do hope that council will endorse this motion going forward, calling on more funding and declaring that mental health is an emergency that does need to be addressed. So I'll leave that at that, and I do hope council will be supportive of this.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Any questions to the motion? Self-explanatory.
I just put an order. I'll second the motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Right, motion's on the floor. I'll call the question.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
and Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
That's carried.
Okay, let's move on. We got another motion, and this one is an easier motion. It's the special meeting of council. And it's for Monday, June 7th, and this is for the strategic plan and the annual meeting of the shareholders for St. Catharines Hydro. This will be moved by Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Harris. And any questions on this one? Okay. And I'll show of hands on this one because it's just that's carried. Okay, we move on now to 11.3, Lyme Disease National Awareness Month. Prior to the discussion, council will hear from delegates. We have 4 delegates that will be presenting. And I'll call upon Ms. Shawna Hughes first. And just again, remind it's 5 minutes for each presentation max, and welcome you to council. As the council coordinator brings the individual on. Any update on the score by anyone by any chance? Okay, it's zeros.
No score after.
Yeah, there or someone's got binoculars.
No score after the first period, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, council coordinator, are we good?
I don't see Shawna Hughes on the call.
I'm here, sorry.
Oh, okay, great.
I wasn't unmuting.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Oh, there's Councillor.
I'm good to go.
Yeah, do you have a video or are you on?
No, I'm just spieling. I'm talking. Oh, I've got to get my video. Sorry, here we. Oh my goodness.
Don't apologize. This is good.
Here we go. And believe it or not, I do teach virtually every day too. It's just a new, I'm not used to Zoom.
You're used to Teams then.
I sure do.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Somebody's helping me out. Thank you. Whoever is helping me out.
All right.
I've clicked it. I'm not on there, am I yet?
You came up, but then you disappeared.
That's bizarre. Can my helper help me out again, please? Yeah, I'm pressing start my video.
Well, if we don't have you on video, you can Shawna, you can go without video.
Okay, yeah, that's bizarre. All right.
No problem. Turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Here we go. Good evening, Mayor Zenzik and councillors. My name is Shawna Hughes. I'm 44 years old and I have chronic Lyme disease. I started realizing just over 7 years ago that something wasn't right after I had fallen over a student in my class, hurting my back. My legs began to vibrate, and for 4 years, they vibrated 24 hours a day. Little did I know that that was only the beginning. It had got much worse. It is believed that the Borrelia burgdorferi, the Lyme bacteria, lay dormant in my body, and the trauma of the fall brought it out. Extreme pain in my back, hips, and neck, no energy, fatigue, blurry vision, allodynia, full body numbness, tingling feelings in my face, feet, legs, and arms, sleep issues, weakness, nausea, stiffness, Bell's palsy, loss of appetite, flushing, chest pain, Raynaud's syndrome, burning hands, ringing in the ears, posture orthostatic, tachycardia syndrome, or POTS, loss of balance, migraines, memory issues, brain fog. I could go on and on. I ended up having to rely on a cane if I wanted to be mobile, and relied on many people to help me out, especially my husband and my parents. I had seen over 20 doctors, specialists, healthcare providers. I have traveled from St. Catharines to London to Hamilton to Toronto for appointments over the years, and I had received a number of diagnoses. I had been tested for lupus a few times, MS, connective tissue disorders, and more. I had a couple close friends and family members suggest that I get tested for Lyme disease in the States. I had said I had been tested here back in 2016, and the test came back negative. I got a name of a naturopath in St. Catharines that I was told could help me. I'm so glad I did. November 2017, I found out that I did indeed have Lyme disease. It was a bittersweet day for sure. The symptoms of Lyme disease often involve multi-systems in the body, causing varying symptoms. This has led to the disease often being called the great imitator, as it mimics many other diseases. No system in my body was untouched. If diagnosis and treatment is not pursued in a timely manner, this infection could potentially lead to complex and chronic health concerns, hence why there are so many of us that have been in the same situation. Couldn't find the proper treatment here in Ontario with my diagnosis. I knew that I needed to find an LLMD or Lyme literate medical doctor in New York State to help me out, as I knew doctors here wouldn't be allowed to treat me. I was able to locate a doctor about 5.5 hours away from my home, close to Albany, that could help. I headed to the Stram Center. I had an assessment in March 2018, and by mid-April, I began my intensive treatment plan, leaving my 2 young kids and my husband each week. The doctor there also told me he felt that I had 2 co-infections to go along with Lyme, Babesia, which is similar to malaria, and Bartonella. Testing confirmed this. Co-infections are quite common with those with Lyme disease and are sometimes more of a challenge to treat. I was put on a regimen of antibiotic IVs, anti-malarial drugs, along with taking pain medication I was already on, and other treatments. I had various therapies there as well. Within 1 week of treatment, my vibrating legs started to go away a bit, and within 3 weeks, my vibrating legs had disappeared most of the time. I was treated 4 days a week for 8 weeks, got a PICC line inserted July 2008, and I had it in for 14 months, where I had ongoing treatment. Dr. Schramm was then able to put me in touch with a doctor in Buffalo. I felt I had hit a plateau. I had certainly come a long way from where I started in Albany. I was told that I was absolutely debilitated when I first arrived. Although I had come a long way, we all knew I still had a long way to go. I traveled the hour to Buffalo every Monday for a number of weeks. I completed UVB therapy, ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy, treatments, antibiotic IVs, plus quite a bit more. I received tons of injections in my neck, bottom of my skull, my hips, and my back over weeks as well. I headed back to St. Catharines after my appointment on Mondays with the IV medication that I needed to treat myself for the rest of the week, along with all my injections. We never had an issue coming back into Canada. Quite often, we could get a border guard just shaking their head in disbelief that Canadians had to travel to the States for help. Going to physio, massages, acupuncture, fascial stretch therapy, osteopathy, Thai yoga, massage yoga, and seeing my psychologist have all helped me get this far as well. I currently head to Hamilton every 4 weeks for injections into my hips, back, neck, and skull. I believe that I am at 90% now. I'm not in remission. Remission means there are no symptoms. I still believe I will get there. I have pulled this from the Lyme Ontario's website. The serological testing for Lyme disease is riddled with conflicting literature on accuracy, sensitivity, and use. Therefore, it is strongly advised that diagnosis is based on clinical presentation and risk factors. In Ontario, Lyme disease testing follows a 2-tiered process, which measures antibodies in the blood. The first step is called enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, or ELISA, and the second step are Western blots. If the ELISA, the first step, is negative, then the Western blots, the second step, will not be performed. It has been noted that this 2-tiered testing process has limitations due to false negative results. Therefore, it is important that clinicians assess each case and not rule out this disease based on serology alone. Can you imagine how many people in Canada are walking around with Lyme and not knowing it? I had to fully stop working as an elementary school teacher in November 2017. My goal was to get myself better, to be there for myself and my family. I'm happy to report that I headed back to work for half-time September 2019. It's something that I had missed so very much. This past September, I attempted to work full-time in virtual school for DSPN, which didn't last too long, but I have continued the year working 3/4 time. I will attempt full-time again this coming September. My story is not my own. There are far too many of us out there that share the same story. My blood still boils when I think that I had to leave my family and head to another country for help. My treatment cost over $120,000. There are many who end up having to spend way more than that. It's not right. Please be tick aware. Ticks are not going anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hughes, and thank you very much for sharing your personal story. Okay, so what we're going to do is let's get through the 4 speakers, because if not, I'm going to go through the 4 speakers, and then if you have questions, you can ask them by name. Okay, so the next speaker is Miss Rita Adams. Welcome, Miss Adams.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share my experience with Lyme disease. My journey began on May 4th, 2014, which started out with a tingling sensation in my toes, quickly turned to debilitating pain in all my extremities. Within 2 weeks, I had lost the use of my arms and legs, began slurring my speech, lost half my memory, and started to lose my vision. I endured multiple doctors and ER visits where they all suspected I had MS. Unfortunately, with the extensive wait of 8 months for an MRI, I had no other choice but to travel to Buffalo to pay out of pocket for an MRI. When the results came back normal and MS was ruled out, I was left with an unsolved mystery. I was working for the region at Social Assistance and Employment Opportunities. I had just bought a house, was a single mother, and completely unable to work or function in life. I had to rely on everyone for everything, including basic care. I had spent months waiting on test after test to determine what has caused me this amount of excruciating pain and why I was deteriorating so fast. No one ever suspected Lyme disease. It wasn't until I read a newspaper article about a man who was suspected of having MS, but it turned out to be Lyme disease. I asked my doctor to test me, and he said how rare it was, but he would try anyway. The results came back positive. I was sent to an infectious disease specialist at McMaster because no one in the region was able to help me, and I started doxycycline. Unfortunately, due to the wait time from when symptoms were onset, it was too late. The Lyme disease had become too serious. I had to have a PICC line put in and needed intravenous antibiotics daily for 9 weeks. In total, I had over 200,000 milligrams of antibiotics, which caused additional issues like C. diff. Once treatment was complete, the symptoms had improved, but I was left with the devastating damage this disease has caused. I have now developed several other conditions due to having a serious case of Lyme disease. To date, I have been diagnosed with post-Lyme disease, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, neuropathy, complex regional pain syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, and severe migraines. This May, it's been 7 years since I became seriously ill. I was a healthy individual. I was successful in my employment and had earned leadership awards at the region. I was an active volunteer and had been in several newspapers for my contributions to better our community. Now I'm considered fully disabled and struggle to function with daily tasks. So although I was diagnosed in Ontario, the lack of awareness delayed treatment, the wait time for specialists is remarkably unacceptable, and the support for post-Lyme disease is non-existent. There needs to be better awareness, testing, treatment, and ongoing care. I hope my journey will encourage this much needed change.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. And again, thank you for sharing your story. It's a personal story, and thank you for creating more awareness. Okay, we're going to move on to the next speaker, Ms. Nicole Kent. And then the final speaker will be Ms. Ruth Peters. Ms. Kent.
Hi, I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep,
Right,
we're all good. Yep.
So first of all, thank you for having me. My story is much like those 2 stories you heard, but also very different in ways, because I find that that's how it works with Lyme disease. it can be so similar in so many ways, but everyone seems to struggle with a lot of different symptoms and may have been undiagnosed, I guess I should say, for a bit longer. So for me, I actually grew up in Port Dalhousie, and it was about 9 years ago. I remember being bit by a tick, but unfortunately back then it didn't really mean anything to me. There wasn't much awareness at all. I didn't even really know what Lyme disease was. I did not know that ticks carried it. So unfortunately, I just went on with my life and thought I just had another bug bite. So I look back and I had no idea that like that was about to change my life so drastically for about 3 years. And I was one of the, I want to say, unlucky ones that didn't get symptoms right away. So I did not get that bullseye rash. I did not get flu-like symptoms right away. I don't know if it was because I'm a fairly healthy person, but it took me about 3 years to even start noticing slow onset symptoms as far as sinus issues and strep throat and pink eyes and all these strange things coming on. So I eventually started noticing my brain fog and lack of energy. And it wasn't until, like I think someone else mentioned, you seem to hit this wall, this very intense wall, whether you have stress in your life or maybe something else on your physical body causing it. But regardless, there usually is this time where you really start to notice something is wrong. And that happened to me. I did end up getting tested for Lyme disease, along with a lot of other things like lupus and a bunch of the other diseases that were also mentioned. And my Lyme test came back negative. So they started treating me for lupus instead. And they actually did put me on a medication as well. I decided to start refusing that because I really felt strongly there was something else going on. So I spent 3 more years seeing about 20 specialists. And over those 3 years, I just continued to get worse and worse. And the Lyme started to attack every organ in my body that it already had. And I finally got an MRI that showed that I was full of lesions and inactive areas in my brain. So it, at that point, had fully attacked my nervous system and everything. At that point, it felt I was having a lot of trouble walking, talking, and so on. So I was told to maybe seek further testing somewhere else because maybe that it would say something different. And I did. I got tested in the States and it came back positive. It was not only positive, it was positive from multiple strains, multiple co-infections, and a really rare co-infection called Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever that is very deadly. There's a lot of stuff going on. So it made me question why I received one test that was just straight up negative versus something that was so advanced and had so many answers. So not only that, but I then didn't know where to go from there. My doctor literally looked at me and said, I'm not really sure what to do next. I can try and refer you to a specialist here. Unfortunately, they denied me because I didn't have a positive test here. I only had a positive one in a different country. So I couldn't even seek any help here in this country, let alone in this city. So I ended up going to Florida for help. And I went there for 5 months of intensive treatment on antibiotics and IV infusions for 8 days of the week for about 8 hours each day. And it helped, it did. Unfortunately, I'm still battling. It wasn't enough and I couldn't continue. I was there during COVID, so that was the reason why I took them home. But also I was about $180,000 in, and that was out of my pocket, out of my family's pocket. My mom had to sell her business. I could go on about the things that it had done on my family and on me. And I get really emotional talking about it because I decided to put myself out there and put my story out there for others to help. And I started receiving endless people talking to me and asking me questions like every day. I get about 4 messages a day. I would say in total, I've had about 300 messages and emails. And it's just people crying to me for help, asking me where to go. What do I do? How do I get testing? How do I know if I have Lyme disease? What did you do? What did you get for help? And it's so sad. Honestly, it makes me cry like constantly because I don't know what to tell them. I wish I could tell them more. I try to tell them to maybe get tested in the States, maybe seek help there or what I've done. But unfortunately, I'm not even healed yet. I don't even know what's going to work for me. So I can't even give them an answer either. It breaks my heart to think too. I'm fairly privileged and can pay for it, but I know other people can't at all in any way. So yeah, I could go on, and I know I'm probably at my 5 minutes. So
I appreciate that.
thank you very much. Yeah.
It's thank you for sharing that, and there will be opportunity for a few questions, and thanks for sharing that, Ms. Kent. And we're going to go to Ruth Peters. Ms. Peters will be the final speaker on the delegation, and then we can have some questions. Ms. Peters.
Hi, sorry, my video, trying to get my video off. Can you hear me though? Yep,
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, here we go.
How you doing? Welcome. And if it does freeze up and you want to go back just to the mic, you can turn the video off if it does freeze. I think right now it's frozen. I'll just look to the council coordinator, make sure that we're bringing Ms. Peters back on.
Yeah, I think she's frozen at her end, not ours.
Okay. So can you move her to a room and then bring her back in?
I can certainly try that. Just a moment, please.
Okay, no problem. All right, so we do have some questions. We have a motion.
So we're going to try to get Ms. Peters back into the meeting. I don't know if you want to go to questions before then.
Can we just take a 2-minute break? Just
you can recess
if you can.
Oh. She is coming back in. Do you still want to do a 2-minute recess?
No, we gotta keep going, and just wondering.
Hello, sorry. Oh, hi.
I'm sorry. No worries. If
I don't know what happened there. Sorry.
No problem. It was the video froze. So if it does go to freeze again, you can just turn the video off. And sometimes it's just the bandwidth in your system. So yeah, turn it over to you.
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm sorry for the technical delays. My name is Ruth Peters. I'm a resident here of St. Catharines, and I'm here tonight to voice my support for the motion being presented by Councillor Kevin Townsend calling for improved testing and treatment for Lyme. This is a very personal issue to me and my family, as both my daughters have been diagnosed with Lyme disease, and getting this diagnosis was not easy for either one of them. Lyme's extremely complicated, as you've heard, and it comes with many co-infections and other health issues. And while lots of patients share symptoms, few are collectively the same, which my daughters are a great example of. They both have very different bits and pieces. Lyme's known as the great imitator, as it's often misdiagnosed and it's often left untreated. The Ontario Ministry of Health's current approach to Lyme is very narrow, limited, and focuses only on a small aspect of the disease, often with unreliable results. These false negative tests leave patients struggling for answers, subject to ongoing other tests, or told their symptoms are simply psychosomatic. As a parent, it's heart-wrenching to see your child suffer, to know their pain is real, and hear them be told it's just stress or it's all in their head, or to watch them be put through endless tests with no validation and no answers. After numerous visits to our family doctor, a couple trips to Emerge, 2 different neurologists, an internal medical specialist, and multiple alternative care practitioners, and still no answers to what was causing our daughter's illness, our own research and quest for answers led us to do testing for Lyme through a lab in California at our own personal expense. After getting a positive Lyme diagnosis, we still didn't know how to get treatment. We found a doctor in New York State, and for 2 years, my daughter underwent treatment with her. However, when she still didn't get better, we made the decision to take to a clinic in Florida, where she underwent extensive in-person daily treatments for 4 months. She and I moved to Florida for this period, disrupting our lives and at great personal expense. Using the knowledge we acquired at this time, we discovered that our other daughter had been misdiagnosed years earlier and also had Lyme and co-infections. She went from being told that she had a lifetime chronic illness that she'd just have to learn to deal with, learn how to manage with pain meds, and change her lifestyle, to discovering that she had Lyme and that she could be treated, but only at our personal expense. For her treatment, we originally went to Vancouver, but then we were able to find a local naturopathic doctor to help her. We have been very fortunate to have found great naturopathic doctors to provide treatment, but this has been at great personal expense with no OHIP coverage. Imagine being a parent, seeing your child suffering, and finally discovering what's causing their illness, and then not being able to afford treatment. May is also mental health awareness and another area of need, and we've talked about it tonight, but our current healthcare system subjects Lyme patients to horrendous mental health strains. Imagine having your physical symptoms ignored or being told they're imagined when you're struggling daily, or finally getting a diagnosis and not being able to afford treatment. The mental health strain of Lyme is very real and very huge. Our family has been fortunate. With the generous support from other family and friends and our own personal situation, we have been able to access alternative healthcare. And both my daughters are doing much better, continue to improve, but still are not 100% healthy. But this is not an option for many families and not what universal healthcare is all about. This is an important motion. Improved testing is the first step to providing answers and potential treatment for many people who currently going undiagnosed, suffering from Lyme, and searching for answers and desperate to get help. Thank you, Councillor Townsend, for bringing this motion to the table. And I ask you on Council to support this motion and show Lyme sufferers that St. Catharines does care. They're not alone and there's help for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Peters. And again, as all the speakers have given their personal experiences, this is an important subject matter to hear and listen for members of our community. So I'll now open the floor. So if you have a question, just indicate the speaker and we'll go from there. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank all four of the presenters for coming in tonight. I know it's very tough and that takes a lot of courage and to step forward and share your experience and your story. My question is to all four, and my question is did any level of government assist with funding for the expensive treatment testing that all of you had to go and get done?
I can jump in and go first and say absolutely not, nothing. Everything was paid out of pocket. I did save medical receipts for some of our other country, and we were able to claim them as medical expenses, although I did get audited every year and have to fight for every tiny piece of paper and receipt to get any kind of tax credit, even for what we paid out of pocket. But our family probably has spent, similar to Nikki's, probably well over, probably close to $200,000 in medical bills. And again, I feel fortunate that with support from family and friends in our position, we were able to access that care, but we had no funding whatsoever, no support from government.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to say the same thing. that every single dollar has come out of my family. I'm very lucky and fortunate. I did a GoFundMe and was able to raise about $35,000, which was absolutely amazing. But even so, that's from friends, family, community. And now I'm still paying about $3,000 a month just to keep up with all the supplements and herbal IV infusions and everything that I can receive here. So, yeah.
Ms. Adams?
Mine was partially funded. The test for the Lyme disease was funded. The antibiotics was funded. However, all of the driving commitments, all of the expense of getting to therapy was not.
And then for me, I got some tax credits back, but same thing, I was audited with the hundreds upon hundreds of receipts that I had kept as well. So we did get a little bit of money back that way. And similar to Nikki, there was a GoFundMe page started up, and it was the amazing support from the community, my family, my friends, that I believe it was just over 30,000 as well that was raised. But again, no thanks to the government. It was thanks to the community, family, and friends.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is for Ms. Ken. Ms. Ken had mentioned that awareness is something that is needed in resources because there was nowhere to go. I'm just wondering if you could just elaborate on that. What kind of awareness, what type of resources? I know that the region does have a section on Lyme disease, but it sounds like there's just not enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people would agree with me too, that there definitely should be somewhere to go to just kind of give you some basic answers and what to do, what Lyme really means, what it's all about, and potentially even somewhere for people that have it to be able to communicate. Like I know there's support groups, there's some Facebook groups and whatnot, but I feel that everything I come across or everything that I even would like to see is made by someone who's actually suffering with Lyme disease or has, which I know is not really easy to put on yourself and then take on being an advocate and also spreading awareness and all of it as well. So some form of platform that people could really communicate on. I don't know, as far as the city goes too, right? Because everyone feels that they would love for their place of home to feel like they are caring about the issue and doing what they can to, you know, further address it and hopefully fix things. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. And to all four of you for delegating tonight. I really appreciate your courage for coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Just in terms of, I think there is broad-based support for the entire motion being brought forward by Councillor Townsend, just based on the reactions that we're getting. So we do have a lot more questions of councillors. Do you have specific questions pertaining to the motion? We've heard the life experiences from the members of our community. What process do you want to go with? Can we ask, Councillor Garcia, how many questions do you have?
Mr. Mayor, I have two questions. I think they're fairly quick.
To all speakers, or who are you asking?
Well, the first one, I think any of the speakers can comment on, and the other one is Councillor Townsend.
Okay. I'll ask Councillor Townsend the question that you have first.
Okay. I noticed through you, Mr. Mayor, that the motion refers to provincial support. Is there any need to address this to the federal government in any way?
Because we're looking for OHIP coverage on this. That was kind of my focus. We can certainly request the federal government to be involved as well.
Thank you. I would think perhaps they could help with testing. And my other question, Mr. Mayor, was I'm so thankful that these presenters came on. I think we've all heard of Lyme disease, but it certainly put it in perspective for me how serious the symptoms are. And my one question to any of the presenters, it so happened that all the presenters were female and also the daughters of the one presenter. Does Lyme disease tend to affect females more than males? I'm just curious.
I don't believe so. I think that may have just been a coincidence. I don't know the proper statistics, but I think it is fairly equal, but I could be wrong. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
It makes sense. It's probably just coincidence that you were presenting, but as I said, thank you all for sharing that. It certainly put it in perspective for me how serious it is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Phillips.
Just quickly, first of all, to council, Shawna Hughes, I've known her since the day she was born. She's like a second daughter to us, and I attest to everything that she has gone through. It has been an absolute tragedy for what she's had to go through. And Shawna, what I'm going to ask you is first steps. If somebody thinks they have been bitten by a tick, what would you suggest they do now that you've been through it all? What would be your first thing?
First step. All right. Now that you have me crying, Bill. The first step would be, and again, I'm going to be quite honest here. You may have people tell you to take it to public health. Your tick, if you still happen to have it, most don't. Please don't take it to public health. There is actually a wonderful company that was started by the name of Genetics, and Justin started this this company, and the testing of the tick itself is a lot better than what we have available to us. So that would be step number one. Number two is also to realize that many people think that if you don't have a bullseye rash, then you're okay. Well, I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong about with the other three ladies, but I think it's about 35%, 30% of those with Lyme actually have bullseye rashes that come to be. So please don't think that you don't have Lyme disease if you don't have a rash. Get to a doctor. Get to a doctor that will prescribe antibiotics for you. The quicker you get on antibiotics, the better chances of you becoming that you're better afterwards. And it's not one day of antibiotics. It is not 2 weeks of antibiotics. The spirochete, the Lyme spirochete life cycle is 4 weeks. So you need, usually they say 6 weeks. And I'm saying usually, and those people are those that actually know about Lyme, 6 weeks is what you're looking for antibiotics. Those that get bitten right away, get treated right away, they probably will not end up where we all are today because of that. So that's where I would start. Find a Lyme literate medical doctor, a Lyme literate naturopath. Reach out to others that you know have had Lyme, that know somebody that has Lyme, because they can probably put you in the right direction of where to go for help. I know our Lyme disease groups on Facebook, every day I can't tell you the number of questions that are asked. My 3-year-old, I actually saw 2 cases of young ones today that were bitten. My 3-year-old was bitten by a tick. What can I do? So you need to search out those people that can help you, I guess would be my answer. My long-winded answer.
And the students at EI McCully are definitely looking forward to seeing you in September.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Thanks, Phil.
All right, thank you, Councillor Phillips, and Councillor Dodge, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of my questions were answered, but my one question is to the presenters. First of all, thank you very much for coming forward and sharing your stories with us. I know it's difficult, but the treatments that you go out of country for and whatnot, is it because there's nothing in Canada that can do this, or we're just not covered in Canada to provide that service?
If I can touch on that, I'd like to. I think that there are places that it's getting a little better as well, that there are more and more places that do offer forms of treatment. But kind of like I was saying before, you actually have to have a positive test in Canada stating that you have Lyme disease. And I think that that's the problem, much like myself, that you can't get that if you're unable to receive a positive Lyme disease test here, if it's not properly testing it. And I don't think anyone mentioned, but what happens is if you wait long enough to get tested, it will no longer show positive because of the way the disease is so complex and works. It starts to hide and mimic in your system, and it's very hard to test. So yeah, that being said, there are some places, but unfortunately they're not able to help and treat people because I think that they can potentially lose their license, or some things can happen if they treat people that are not officially positive in the country. So that was my case, at least. But I think a lot of people, and know a lot of people in the same situation as that too.
If I can jump in, I can say, having gone through it with both my daughters, when my first daughter was diagnosed about 6 years ago, there was very little medical support here. Naturopaths have always been the ones more prepared and willing to cope and help with Lyme disease. They do treatments, but naturopaths in Ontario cannot prescribe antibiotics. So any treatments that you need antibiotics for, and that's part of why we went to Vancouver with my second daughter, is at the time naturopaths in Vancouver could prescribe, and they can. They just, because of COVID now, they can no longer see patients out of the province. So there are, as Nikki said, there's more and more places. There's a couple places in Toronto now, some private clinics that are offering treatment with MDs. And but again, a lot of them are private clinics with only a little bit of it covered by OHIP. So even though we are getting some local treatment in Ontario, it is still a lot of it out of pocket. And as I said, a lot of the guidelines and the recommended treatment and the antibiotic protocols that are highly recommended by Lyme doctors aren't frowned upon and not accepted by the Ontario Medical Board. So as Nikki said, a lot of doctors are hesitant to prescribe the medication that's needed because it's just from their training, it's not what they're told. And from the medical board, they're being told not to do long-term antibiotics treatments. You know, my daughter's on antibiotics for months and months and months, and that's frowned upon. And although for other diseases, they do it. But so we are slowly seeing some improvements, but we went out of country because we just could not get care here. And like I say, for the care that is here, it's predominantly by naturopathic doctors who cannot prescribe in Ontario. And again, it's out of pocket.
If I can just jump in quickly, I see I'm the only one who was diagnosed here in Ontario. My infectious disease specialist at McMaster refuses to see anyone who has been tested positive outside of Canada. They will not prescribe, they will not treat, and they will not see any patients who are not tested positive in Ontario.
Thank you, ladies, for that. That's very unfortunate. I mean, I think it's a very serious thing, and you know, we should be trying whatever avenue to help in whichever way we can.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dodge. Councillor Kushner, again, I think we've got a lot of support for the motion, so I'm just wondering who do you have questions for?
Yeah, for all four, like Councillor Garcia, I was very surprised by the impact of Lyme's disease. I've known people who've had it, but I've never heard anybody share their experience like the four of you did. Have you considered making a similar presentation to the region?
I'll just jump in and say, you know, I'd be more than happy to. I haven't considered it. I find it's interesting for me. I'm the mom. It's not my story to. I mean, it's our family story and our family struggle. Part of the reason why I'm here tonight is Kevin actually got in touch, Councillor Townsend, with my daughter Maddie, who has gotten very public and has chosen Lyme awareness to speak. So as my daughters get more comfortable advocating and telling their story, I'm certainly here to support them. And we have a family have made a commitment this year to really speak out. I had mentioned to Councillor Townsend that I'm more than happy to put my name out there and start speaking out on behalf of people and sharing our story, because it's a story that needs to be told.
Okay, thank you. I think would be very worthwhile for such a presentation to be made at the region, because I get the impression, I'm originally from Northern Ontario, and we very rarely heard of ticks, but I certainly hear many more people being affected in this area. Thank you.
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I wasn't sure if I was still allowed to even say something, but I just wanted to also answer your question quick and say that I definitely would. I'm very much so trying to raise any awareness I can, and I feel so many people will relate to my story, do relate to my story, and they are also similar, like I said. So I have no problem sharing mine and doing what I can. So thank you for that, by the way, too.
Thank you.
I unfortunately tried to reach out to the region. I am a regional employee. So I did try and reach out to the region, and they didn't want to hear about it. So instead, what I did was I did a bunch of newspaper articles raising awareness. But I had no luck trying to talk to the region about my experience, about ticks. Unfortunately, they just didn't want to hear it.
Thank you.
Okay, and Ms. Hughes, because Councillor Kushner.
Yeah, I absolutely. If I need I'm not really comfortable speaking in front of people. It's totally out of my comfort zone, but absolutely, same as others. Our stories need to be told. I know I had the standard visit my school a couple of years ago. My friend had got in touch, and again, awareness is needed. Awareness is absolutely needed. So if anybody comes forward asking, absolutely, I would do it for sure.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I think that's it for the speakers. And we'll need a motion to approve the delegations as a block. Councillor Townsend, Councillor Littleton, all in favor? Okay, so that's carried. Thank you very much to the presenters for sharing all of your experiences, and very helpful as we gain a better understanding of this. Councillor Townsend, we need a seconder for this motion. Councillor Phillips, and so Councillor Phillips seconder. And again, like Councillor Townsend, do you really want to go into a lot of detail in explaining this, or I think you got full support from council?
No, Mr. Mayor, I would, I'll be quick here. I just want to say again, thank you to the women for coming forward. We do know that it is an issue. More testing needs to be done. More better treatment and care has to happen. Is it a municipal issue? Well, yeah, it is, because we just heard from a number of young women affected here in the city of St. Catharines. We need to bring this conversation up to the higher levels of government to make sure that this doesn't happen, that these people don't have to go south and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket to get the treatment that they need. So I hope council will support this. I do believe that Councillor Phillips did have an amendment that he wanted to make, and I'm not sure if he submitted that or not.
No, I did. Yes, I do have a friendly amendment that the mayor bring this forward to Niagara region, and additionally request that the region build an awareness campaign with further online resources for families affected by Lyme disease.
Okay.
I'm hoping that's friendly, Councillor.
Yes.
Okay, so any speakers?
I'm sorry, through you, could I possibly ask for that last explanation again about the direction to the region to?
Sure, I'll read that again.
I didn't hear it very well, thank you.
That the mayor bring this forward to Niagara region, and additionally request that the region build an awareness campaign with further online resources for families affected by Lyme disease.
Okay, let's got that.
Thank you.
Any other speakers to this motion? Okay, I would just say that this is not unique to this government currently. The previous governments have failed completely to deal with this. This has been brought from members of our community to previous governments provincially, and they refused to actually acknowledge it. So I'm hoping maybe with this campaign, there will be a better opening for the current government to actually listen to the people being impacted by it, because the previous governments failed dramatically to actually address this. New York State had issued this as an epidemic, and the Ontario government previously closed its eyes, failed to even acknowledge this. So let's hope that this motion will gain the attention of this current government to actually do something concrete about it, because we've heard from the stories today that previous governments have failed completely on this matter. And I know from a personal perspective, because I got personal friends who have suffered from this, and when they reached out to the previous government in Ontario, it was a closed door. Call the question.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Cisco? Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Counselor Littleton,
Yes.
Counselor Porter,
Yes.
Counselor Sorrento,
Yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
That's carried.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend, for bringing this forward. We got another motion being brought forward. Councillor Cisco, you're on the table, and this is building permit fees for Silver Spire. Should be housekeeping. We'll hopefully not see you around the table on this one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Porter. Silver Spire Church on St. Paul Street is going through some renovations work. They're going to be creating a whole lot of additional access when it comes to laundry and shower services in the downtown for folks who are living rough in our community. So I'm hoping the council can see fit to waive the appropriate fees as listed on the screen. They're up to a maximum of $2,000. There are funds uncommitted in the hydro reserve, so I'm hoping that council will see fit to vote in favor of this so that Silver Spire can continue the great work that they're doing in our downtown.
Any questions on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question to the clerk.
Counselor Cisco,
Yes.
Counselor Porter,
Yes.
Counselor Littleton,
Yes.
Counselor Dodge,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Kushner,
Yes.
Counselor Miller,
Yes.
Counselor Phillips,
Yes.
Counselor Sorrento,
Yes.
Counselor Townsend,
Yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
and Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
That's carried.
Thank you, Councillor Cisco, for bringing this forward. 11.5, Councillor Kushner, you're going to be raising a bit of a racket. Over to you.
Thanks. The motion, Mr. Mayor, is to have a public meeting with respect to the fees.
This one will be housekeeping because it'll call for the public meeting.
Right.
So just a show of hands on this one. Thank you, Councillor Kushner. This will be coming back to another meeting, I'm assuming, for June 14th. Thank you. Okay. Any calls for notice of motion? Councillor Phillips. Unmute.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I did submit one to the clerk yesterday.
Okay, can we bring it up just as a quick notice?
Basically, we have a, do you want me to read it or?
So it's a notice of motion, so
Just a notice of motion, yeah.
Okay, so it's right there. And for council, it'll be considered at the next meeting, I believe.
Yes, and if I could just add, Mr. Mayor, given this situation, I encourage council to take a drive over to Port Weller East to get a good understanding of what the situation is.
Good idea. Okay.
If they have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a call or Councillor Dodge.
Okay, any other notices of motion? Okay, seeing none. We're going to do an in-camera. We do have an in-camera item. And the item is pertaining to proposed or pending acquisition, disposition of land by the municipality or local board. It's a property matter. It's a lease. It's 37A Lakeside Drive Realty File 86120. Turn it over to the clerk to read the disclaimer, and then we'll have a motion to go in camera.
By attending the in-camera session, each member of council acknowledges that their obligations under the Code of Conduct, including responsibilities related to the confidentiality of the closed session materials and discussions, remain the same as if they were physically present at the meeting. This includes that members are not permitted to record the proceedings and that they must ensure that no other person can see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place.
All right, move to go in camera. I've got Councillor Harris, second by Councillor Dodge. All in favor? Okay, carried. Go to the breakout room. We'll be taken to a breakout room, I believe.
I don't know how I ended up back here.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're in the right room.
Hi, we're not in camera right now. Just hold on one moment, and you're going to get sent back over.
Okay. It was like I was teleported back in time to when the Leafs were tied 0-0.
That was an hour ago.
Okay. It's still recording.
Imagine
Still recording, still recording.
So do we know what the score of the hockey game is?
No idea.
2-0.
2-0.
Just to be clear, 2-0 Montreal.
I think Councillor Kushner was PVRing it. We just wrecked it for him. Okay, are we going back over, or like where's Deputy Clerk has disappeared? Maybe she went over to the ante room.
We're just working it out. A little patience will be there in just a moment.
No problem. We're still recording. Okay, so the clerk's back. We're all ready to go. All right. We have a motion rising from in camera pursuant to property matter lease 37A on Lakeside Drive, and we get Counselor. Okay, we all are. I just want to make sure we're all good, right? To the clerk, we good?
We have quorum. I'm here. You're here. I think we're good.
Okay, I just want to make sure that no one's left in the room. Counselor Dodge is making a motion. Seconding that motion will be Counselor Phillips. And the motion on the screen will be different than the one you see in front of you. It'll be council direction to staff. And look to the clerk to call the question.
Counselor Dodge.
Yes.
Counselor Phillips.
Yes.
Counselor Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Williamson.
Yes.
Counselor Harris.
Yes.
Counselor Miller.
Yes.
Counselor Porter.
Yes.
Counselor Cisco.
Yes.
Counselor Sorrento.
Yes.
Counselor Kushner.
Yes.
Counselor Littleton.
Yes.
Counselor Townsend.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
That's carried.
Okay, so we move on. Is there any reports from staff? I mean, from council? I don't see any. ABC's motion to receive the advisory committees of council. Can I have a motion? Councillor Williamson, second by Councillor Littleton, all in favor. That's carried. Reading of bylaws, that bylaws listed on council agenda A through L be read a first time, considered and passed, that they be signed and executed by the mayor and city clerk. I have a motion for the bylaws. Councillor Harris and Councillor Kushner, all in favor. That's carried. A reading of additional bylaws, that we have a motion that council.
We do not need the additional bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And members of council, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Councillor, she doesn't want to be a councillor. CAO Chemnitz, if you want to come back on. And it's up to you, council, if you want to have a few words to say to Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to, as the second youngest member of council, thank Shelley for her leadership. And I can always appreciate the fact that every time I call Shelley, even with a problem, she always picks up the phone. So I think you're an all-star. I think you're awesome. And I also want to thank you. I've had the privilege of sitting on the PAC board with Shelley, and her leadership, her patience on sometimes stressful meetings just shows what type of leader she is. And congratulations on a well-deserved retirement. And hopefully you'll be able to travel soon once these vaccines get pumped out. So congratulations, and it's been a privilege working with you.
Thanks, Councillor. Well said. Councillor Kushner.
Yes, Shelley, I'd like to emphasize my appreciation to you for providing us with an excellent foundation with the staff and the CAO that you have mentored to move the corporation forward. And I would wish you the very best in your retirement. And on a more personal level, I look forward to seeing you at Brock taking economics. Thank you.
Already passed that course. It's all good.
Councillor Porter, you're up.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you for everything. You are a fantastic leader. I'm really going to miss you. Retirements always get to me. When you announced in camera like several months ago, I think I was crying. But you've been an inspiration for lots of women in the community. You're the first female CAO. And you've done an excellent job leading us through the pandemic. And when the mayor talked about trust, we did trust you through the pandemic. I hope you know that. I absolutely trusted you, and I was so glad you were there. This has been a very difficult year. I hope you get lots of rest, and I wish you all the best in your retirement. Thank you for your commitment to the city. We all felt it, especially in the last year.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Williamson.
Shelley, I just want to say thank you for putting up with me for over a quarter of a century. You have in a certain respects my condolences, but I wish some of your calmness was a little bit more contagious because you are truly grace under pressure, and I've learned a lot from you, believe it or not, and I thank you for your service. Much appreciated. Take care and have a long and healthy retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shelley, I think we met a very long time ago when you were the Director of Finance, and there's been a lot of water under the bridge, particularly last term. I keep wanting to say last semester. I don't know why. Must be having a lot of conversations with Kevin there, being a teacher. But I'm not going to say goodbye because I know I'm going to see you and Brian around a lot. So I'll just say see you later. Thank you so much for your leadership, your direction. And on a really personal note, you know, I really like the fact that you play organ at your church. I think that's fantastic. So I guess this kind of humanizes you a little bit. You know, you're not just the CAO, but you're Shelley, you're a mom, you're a wife. So we'll see you around. Okay, it's not goodbye. We'll see you later.
I have to say this city was challenged by that too, because when they interviewed me, one of my questions was, you're an accountant, you're left-handed, and you play an instrument. How does that work? I'm serious. That's a direct quote from my interview. Wow. We've improved since then.
Very well, clearly. That's great, Shelley.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Was Councillor Cushing on the hiring committee? I'm just kidding.
Mr. Mayor, that comment was made in camera, so Shelley, be careful.
Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shelley, I wanted to thank you as well. I think you have been excellent, and a couple of other councillors have mentioned things that I would mention. Councillor Townsend mentioned the fact that I always was impressed by the same thing, that you always return your calls. I have had to impose on you to even call you when you're either at the cottage or on the way there, and you still answer the phone. That's very impressive. And Councillor Williamson mentioned the fact that you are always so calm. That is something so important in that executive, and I think we all appreciate that. The last thing I would say is my advice on retirement, as I always tell anybody, retiring, coming from somebody who's been semi-retired for many years, but continue to work in some fashion, that the key to a successful retirement is keeping busy. So I'm sure you already have all kinds of plans about things you're going to do, but you meet so many people who think that retirement means you fall off the table and you don't do anything. And that's a recipe for death, as I always tell everybody. So keep busy, enjoy your life, and we hope to see you soon again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thanks. Congratulations again, Shelley. Excited for you. I know I've talked a little bit in the past is that, you know, I think we handled a totally extraordinary situation during the pandemic very well. And I think a lot of that comes down to you and who you are and your experience and relationships. And I just personally, I will say, I still remember our first meeting with me, you and David Oakes at City Hall after I was elected. And you guys did a good job of hitting me with some reality of what this job was going to be and what I was going to be able to accomplish as a city councilor without totally putting out my passion and fire for it. And I've really enjoyed from that day to this, all the time we've got to work together and I think do some really great things. And I know as you look back, I can't even imagine over the last 30 years, what you've seen the city go through and what you've had a direct hand in making lots of good things happen for the city. So well-deserved and congratulations. And I know you'll enjoy it. So I'm not going to bother telling you that, but I hope to see you on some citizen committees moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. We got Councillor Lilton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I I just wanted to, I think I might have told this story before, but when we were at AMO, Shelley, what I always appreciated was her humility and her quiet leadership, her quiet determination. I think sometimes we look at leaders and we want them to be excitable and loud, and that's not, wasn't you, and it's your style, and it's an admirable style. But at AMO, the one time I remember, I will never forget this, because had it happened to me, the response would have been much different. But your response is perfect. When a gentleman, we were standing around chatting, and a couple of gentlemen were talking chit chat, and they just expected that you were the secretary or you were an administrative assistant. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that position. I'm just saying you are the CAO, and it's a very different position. But it was in the way they spoke to you, and you just sat there, and or not sat there, you stood there with your knowledge of who you are. And I was getting pretty fired up, but you know, I really respect that about you, that humility. So thank you for your leadership, and your decision to move the city quickly into lockdown last year was ahead of the curve. And I know myself, I was like, really, are we sure? And you're like, we're going, we're that's what we're doing. And I'm like, okay, that's what we're doing. So good for you. And I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure working with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Dodge.
Can never get the mic on mute quickly. Well, Shelley, I've had a great pleasure working with you on many levels, and I think that you did a great job. And I wish that if it wasn't for COVID, we would be able to give you a different sort of send off. But I really, truly thank you for your dedication and your service to the city as a public, person. I think that as myself being a public person, I think that people don't always see all the hard work that goes into it and how much dedication people put into it, but you certainly did that. And I think people appreciated that. And earlier when you were talking about that calendar, and now you only have your family calendar, probably in 6 months' time, you're going to be scratching your head looking at the calendar and thinking, when was I able to ever work? So I wish you and your family many, many happy years of retirement, and I hope you enjoy all of it, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. And wrapping up, Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shelley, I'm going to echo what Carrie said. When you announced that you were retiring, I actually teared up a little bit. You were the person who in my first couple of years would patiently sit with me and explain for the first 3 years over and over again how water rates work and the difference between fixed and variable charges and why the system kind of makes sense, and then explain CIP and everything else. And you were incredibly patient. And there were days when I thought, she doesn't have to be, but she is. And I appreciated that. You were also, when I became the budget chair, the calm voice in a couple of rooms when tempers got heated and shouting happened, and you were the person that brought everything back down to earth and guided the whole process through. And I know I leaned on you a lot in my first couple of years as budget chair, and I don't know if I could express how much I appreciated that. And you were the exact right person to be named the CAO. You were the exact right person to take us through the last 15 months, and I can't even imagine where we would be if we didn't have you. And so it was said by a couple of people, like, it's not goodbye. And I have the very lucky benefit of being your neighbor down the street, so I know I will run into you when you're out on a walk. Far more relaxed now than the last couple of times we've run into each other on the walks. And I will only say, I think Councillor Garcia said, you've got to stay busy. And Councillor Miller said, looking forward to applications. I am looking forward to your application to be chair of the Transit Commission as much as I know you are. So I wish you good luck and Godspeed. And I hope you enjoy every second.
Are you so sure about that?
You're the only person I could think of.
Thank you very much, all of you. I mean, I know COVID makes goodbyes different, but this was very heartfelt, and thank you very much. I have really, really enjoyed working at the city. I think it's a great place to work, and you can just be so, you're able to impact your own community and the Niagara community, and that is the part that I've really been proud of, and all of the staff that I've worked with and the council. Not every day is absolutely terrific. Fridays are better than Mondays, that kind of thing. Not anything to do with council, but thank you so much. I think I sort of said earlier what was in my heart, and I thank you very much for your kind words. They're very much appreciated.
Thank you, Shelley. And thank you to council for sharing your thoughts. Such warm words for the leader of our corporation. And she's going to be around for the next little while as there's a transition. So you will be seeing her on certain files, including the transit file. That's an important one. And I just want to publicly say on the transit file that Shelley has led this from start to almost completion in terms of the decision making. She has been a tireless champion for needing for us to go in a certain direction. And her tireless effort working with other CAOs in Niagara has really moved that transit file farther than it's ever moved. And that's because, again, of her leadership behind the scenes, trying to move us in a direction that will be the benefit of the entire Niagara region, including the city of St. Catharines. So she'll continue to work on that file for the next little while as there's a transition in place for the incoming CAO to begin to establish himself. And that's our incoming CAO, David Oakes. So with that, I can ask Shelley to make the motion to terminate the meeting, but we can't do that because she's not an elected official. So I'll ask someone else to terminate Shelley Kemnett's last meeting of council in her career. And I'll go with, let's see, I'll go with the oldest on council, Councillor Kushner. And I'll go with the youngest on council. Councillor Miller. Okay, so that's who it is. All in favor, folks? Let's give a clap for Shelley. Way to go, Shelley.
All right, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good long